A young duke named Luca Winterwald came to take revenge on his offenders when he reached maturity and became strong enough to do so. His relatives usurped the power and took possession of the nobleman's property when he was still a child. Luca Winterwald managed to capture the Winter Forest, which many aristocrats wanted to get, but they could not do it for many reasons. Now the hated relatives of the young man got what they deserved. At that time, winter ended in the duchy. Soon the long-awaited spring will come, during which buds bloom on the trees, fragrant flowers smell, the warm and gentle sun shines, and new life begins and comes into its own. When Luca Winterwald had accomplished his desired revenge, he looked up at the sky and thought about his future. The young man cannot say for sure whether spring will come to the frozen winter forest. Thus ended the beloved multi-volume novel of the main character of this fantasy story. This book is called The Master of the Winter Forest. The girl really loves romantic novels with elements of adventure, blood feud, and irresistible love. The main character turned the last page of her favorite novel and admired its ending, which intrigued her greatly and left a pleasant feeling of something left unsaid. The girl is in her nephew's room, who is sleeping in his bed. She is thinking about the novel she has read and the extraordinary situation in which she found herself by the will of fate. Suddenly, the boy woke up and called his aunt. The main character immediately rushed to him because he was sick and the girl was looking after him. The caring aunt asked her nephew how he was feeling now. Maybe he felt worse or needed something to get better soon. But the boy called the girl for another reason. The child gathered all his strength and said that he wanted his aunt not to waste her precious time and to visit the May festival. After all, she wanted to visit this spring festival so much. The main character smiled at her noble nephew and told him not to worry about it and to think only about his precious health. The May festival will be next year too, so this can be ignored now. After these words, the girl put her hand on her nephew's forehead to check his temperature. She said that the boy was tired and needed to rest, to fall into a deep sleep. This is the best medicine for all diseases. The main character looks at the sick boy. She is sorry that her nephew suddenly fell ill, but at the same time, the girl still does not miss visiting the May festival, but so that the child does not find out about it. This can upset him greatly. The boy calmed down and fell asleep a few minutes later. The caring aunt looks at her nephew attentively, realizing that this child will one day grow up and become Duke Luca Winterwald. It so happened that the soul of the main character magically ended up in her favorite novel and entered the body of the aunt of the boy who is destined to become Luca Winterwald, who will take revenge on his relatives for the insult inflicted on him and the usurpation of power. The Duke's aunt is a minor character in the novel called The Master of the Winter Forest. The girl's name is Judith Maybaum. She is raising her little nephew and trying to do everything in her power for him. The main character soaked a towel in cold water to bring down her nephew's fever. She was tired too. A nurse's job is not easy, but no one else would take care of this unfortunate child. Maybe, having been to the May festival, Judith Maybaum will relax a little and take a break from her daily affairs and problems. Time will tell. And now she must do everything possible so that her nephew recovers as quickly as possible. The girl thought about her unusual fate, which changed dramatically about a month ago. She took over the body of Judith Maybaum and ended up in her favorite romantic novel. One day, the main character, still in her real world, got very drunk. As a result, the girl got hit by a car and lost consciousness. Then she immediately found herself in the fantasy world of her favorite novel in the body of Judith Maybaum. The girl woke up in her bed and did not immediately realize what had really happened to her. But the reality was that she found herself in the body of another person, who also had his own memories. Therefore, the personality of the main character and Judith Maybaum merged into one. Getting up from her bed, the girl looked at herself in the mirror and couldn't believe her eyes. A completely unfamiliar face was looking at her in the reflection. But the main character gradually guessed what had happened. Now she has a new body that has the memories of Judith Maybaum. The main character had to accept this fact and think about what to do next and how to survive in this world that is alien to her. The girl remembered the plot of her favorite novel and realized that she had found herself in a very cruel world, where there is little room for true love, hope, and faith in the future. Here, only the thirst for revenge of the main character, whose name is Luca Winterwald, reigns supreme. Judith Maybaum must remember the entire plot of the novel well in order to understand what to do next. This will be useful to the girl in order to change the fate of her character, who is initially doomed to die in the course of history. Luca Maibaum was an illegitimate child who did not know his father and lost his mother early. He was raised by his aunt Judith Maibaum. That is why the boy bore her last name when he was little. One day, a stranger appeared on his doorstep, introduced himself as his uncle, and revealed the secret of his origin. The uncle informed Luca Maibaum that he was in fact a descendant of the ducal family of Winterwald. After that, he took his nephew to the family castle. But there, the boy had an unenviable fate. Luca's relatives did not accept him and tried in every way to harm him. After some time, the heir to the ducal title in the castle lost everything that was most precious to him. As a result of a conspiracy of relatives, Luca Maibaum's uncle and aunt were killed. Now danger threatened the unfortunate boy, who decided to leave the family castle and change his name. The grown-up Luca Maibaum will return to his rightful possessions as a courageous and renowned war hero, and will take revenge on all his offenders who dared to stand in his way to power. The main character remembered all this information when she incarnated in the body of Judith Maibaum, who raised Luca Maibaum until he was 11. Now she needs to figure out what to do next to change her character's fate. The girl remembered that her character, which she embodied, must die during this fantastic story. This greatly upset the main character, and she almost fell into a panic state because of this. According to the plotline of the girl's favorite novel, the character of Judith Maibaum will become the first victim of insidious intrigues, for which the aristocrats from the Winterwald family will be responsible. But she herself is to blame for what will happen to her in the future. Judith Maibaum treated her only nephew very badly when she did not know that he was the heir to the ducal title. This girl was a very irresponsible young lady who thought only of herself. She fed and clothed Luca Maibaum poorly, demanding that he go to work and earn his own bread. In addition, Judith Maibaum often indulged in various amusements that spoiled her reputation. The cynical and mercantile girl decided to make money on her nephew and sold him to her uncle when he came to take him to the family ducal estate. Unlike Judith Maibaum, the uncle loved his nephew, whom he had been looking for a long time. After this, the cunning aunt of Luca Maibaum, who now bears the surname Winterwald, began to appear frequently at the Duke's castle and hang around among the local aristocrats in the hope of profiting from something else. But this had tragic consequences for her. She fell first victim to the insidious palace intrigues. Understanding all this, the main character concluded that her character was destined to a quick and painful death at the hands of the conspirators. But the girl does not want to share the fate of Judith Maibaum. She decided to fight to the end and do everything to change the plotline of her favorite literary work. The main character remembered that according to the plot of the novel, Luca Winterwald went to the family castle at the age of 11. Now the boy is 10 years old. This means that Judith Maibaum still has time to fix the situation and take care of her nephew. Judith Maibaum has calmed down a bit and gathered her strength. The girl realizes that she cannot change the structure of the entire story into which she has miraculously found herself. But she will try to do everything in her power to change the fate of her character. At first, the main character decided to use her main trump card. She always cooked a variety of dishes very well, so Judith Maibaum arranged a real feast for her nephew. Luca Winterwald's aunt went to the kitchen of her house and prepared a new dish that the boy should like. The girl was a little worried because this time she used previously unknown ingredients. But the dish turned out to be a culinary masterpiece. Now the main character will treat the unfortunate child much better than before. The boy earned his living by carrying out various assignments for the townspeople, and they gave him something to eat for it. These products were barely enough for the boy to maintain his vitality and work for another piece of bread. Judith Maibaum understands that this situation needs to be urgently corrected. When Luca Winterwald returned home tired and hungry, the main character offered him to try a new dish that she had prepared especially for him. This unusual behavior and the aunt's care surprised the child very much. He was used to Judith Maibaum constantly mocking him and scolding him for all sorts of minor mistakes. The main character picked up a pot of stewed meat and said that she wanted to eat this culinary masterpiece with her nephew. Luca Winterwald looks at his aunt and doesn't know what to answer. The confused boy looked suspiciously at Judith Maibaum and asked her if she had gone crazy while he was out on the street. Maybe his aunt should act normal and not pretend to be a caring mother. But the main character was not surprised by such a negative reaction of the boy, and only laughed in response to her nephew's remarks. From now on, Judith Maibaum will take good care of Luca Winterwald. The girl looked closely at her nephew and again plunged into her memories. 5 years had passed since the death of the boy's mother, whose name was Larissa Maibaum. After this sad event, Luca Winterwald remained in the arms of Judith Maybaum. At first, she thought that the child would irritate her with his presence, but over time she saw in the boy the intelligence and beauty of his mother. It should also be noted that all members of Judith Maybaum's family were distinguished by their extraordinary appearance. But Luca Winterwald's aunt was always embarrassed by her unremarkable appearance. That's how nature decreed it. Judith Maybaum noticed that her nephew was becoming as handsome as his mother. This stirred up old emotional wounds in the girl, and she began to resent the boy for being so generously endowed by nature, unlike her. Luca Winterwald's aunt began to systematically vent her anger and envy on the unfortunate boy, who was guilty only of being born very beautiful. But now everything will change for the better, because the main character has entered the body of Judith Maybaum and will do everything to make Luca Winterwald happy and earn his favor. Because this will have a direct impact on their future destinies in this fantasy story. Almost a month has passed, but the main character's care has not had much effect on her relationship with the boy. Now the girl is sitting by the bed of her young nephew, who recently fell ill with a fever. Judith Maybaum was so tired these past few days that she fell asleep sitting next to Luca Winterwald's bed. Suddenly, the girl woke up and decided to check on her nephew's health. The boy is fast asleep and holding his aunt's hand. This had never happened before. It means the child has begun to trust Judith Maybaum. This brings great joy and tenderness to the girl. Now Luca Winterwald is ill and his vigilance is weakened. He never trusted his evil aunt, but now the child needs love and care more than ever. That is why he took Judith Maybaum's hand in his feverish sleep. The main character watches her nephew closely and admires his childish beauty. Suddenly, the boy whispers his mother's name in his sleep and calls her. When the girl saw this, she burst into tears and began to silently scold the previous Judith Maybaum, who treated this wonderful and sweet child disgustingly. The main character cannot understand how one can be such a bad teacher. After this, the nurse noticed the boy's cough, which was causing him great suffering. The girl decided to immediately find the necessary medicines to help her nephew and get him back on his feet. It turned out that Judith Maybaum had no money at all. Therefore, the main character decided to collect medicinal herbs on her own, based on the memories that were preserved in her new body from her previous owner. The girl came up with a good plan. She wants to collect various medicinal herbs and take them to the local healer, who will give good money for them. For these coins, it will be possible to buy the medicine that Luca Winterwald needs now. A few minutes later, the main character collected a large basket of various medicinal herbs. She looked at the result of her work and thought that this would be even more than necessary. Judith Maybaum wants to sell the herbs she has collected and buy not only the necessary medicines, but also some sausages to cook for her nephew. The child needs to eat well and get all the necessary nutrients. The main character thought again about the unfortunate boy who had seen nothing but pain and suffering in his life. The girl promised herself that she would give the boy everything he needed. He would receive excellent food, family comfort, and constant care. Besides, Judith Maybaum has decided to live quietly and modestly when she settles in the ancestral castle of Luca Winterwald. But she still has to live until then. In the meantime, she needs to take care of her nephew, who is currently ill. The medicinal herbs are collected in a basket. Now the main character needs to return to the city to sell the herbs and buy the boy everything he needs. On the way home, the girl was almost hit by a fast-moving carriage of some aristocrat. But everything turned out well. Judith Maybaum returned to a town called Emden, located in an area called Grinhalden. The girl noticed that the town's residents were busy preparing for the May festival. In order to avoid accidentally meeting Judith Maybaum's acquaintances, the main character decided to quickly finish her business in the central part of the city of Emden and return home to treat the boy. Suddenly, the girl heard the voice of a townsman who addressed her by name. He asked Judith Maybaum if she was looking for a new man for fun again. This surprised the main character. She does not know what to answer the annoying stranger. Judith Maybaum looked closely at her interlocutor and noticed that his head reminded her very much of a huge potato. The man, in turn, could not understand why the main character was staring at him so intently. The girl continues to look indifferently at the annoying townsman, whose name is Thomas. The man asked the main character where she was rushing to in such a hurry. Judith Maybaum realized that nothing good could be expected from this gentleman. Therefore, the girl decided to ignore her interlocutor, showing with her whole appearance that she did not want to have anything to do with him. To keep the conversation going, Thomas told Judith Maybaum that he had seen a well-groomed aristocrat today who had arrived in a rich carriage. He had been asking the townspeople about something, and a girl named Leah had already set her sights on him. The main character remembered the carriage that had nearly run her over in the forest and realized that the nobleman the man was talking about was in the carriage. Thomas continues to persistently pursue Judith Maybaum. He asked the girl if she had seen a prominent aristocrat who visited the city of Emden. The main character answered the man that she had not had enough time for this because she was trying to avoid being run over by a noble carriage. The young man thought for a moment and asked if his interlocutor had found a partner to have fun during the May Festival. These questions were already starting to annoy the girl. Judith Maybaum told Thomas that she would not go to the May Festival today because her nephew was ill. The young man said that the girl was simply deceiving him. Thomas continued to insist on his own and asked the main character since when she began to care about her nephew, whom she had previously constantly scolded and could not stand. Judith Maybaum begins to get angry at her annoying interlocutor. The main character decided to put the persistent suitor in his place and said that she had never in her life used her nephew as a reason to refuse Thomas a date. If the girl did not want to date him, she would have said so directly. After these words, Judith Maybaum abruptly turned away from the man and continued on her way. Thomas was confused and now does not know what to do next. He did not expect such a violent reaction from his girlfriend. The young man noticed that the girl had changed somehow, but the persistent man does not want to give in because his pride is hurt. He got angry at his interlocutor and told her that she thinks too highly of herself and therefore will never get married. Now the main character's patience has finally snapped. She returned to Thomas and said that he likes to poke his nose into other people's business, and for this you can pay dearly with your health or something else. Judith Maybaum decided to wipe her opponent out. She said that he should also lower his ego because with such an inflated one, Thomas would never find a wife. A rather unpleasant and complicated situation has developed. The young people are standing opposite each other and looking at each other attentively. Thomas is angry with his girlfriend for her impudence and unfriendliness because he likes her. And Judith Maybaum does not want to communicate with this man now. Her thoughts are occupied with other matters. A few moments later, the situation resolved itself. Thomas turned sharply and walked away from the unkind girl who made him doubt his masculinity. The man was simply tired of being rejected again and again, and he gave in. The main character looked with disdain after Thomas as he left, and thought that now he reminded her of a rotten potato that poisoned the lives of the people around him. After an unpleasant conversation with her suitor, Judith Maybaum quickened her pace again to quickly deal with her business and buy her nephew everything he now vitally needed. At the same time, the girl thought that she never wanted to see Thomas again, but suddenly something completely unexpected happened. The main character sped up her steps so much and was so deep in thought that she did not notice the man in front of her and crashed into him at full speed. She hit the stranger hard and fell onto the stone pavement. When Judith Maybaum came to her senses a little and opened her eyes, she saw that a strange man extended his hand to her and asked her if she was okay. The main character thought the man's voice was familiar. In addition, the girl noticed the expensive attire of this man, so she decided to lower her head and not get involved with this aristocrat. All this could end very badly for her. Judith Maybaum decided at all costs not to look into the eyes of the gallant stranger who apologized for his tactlessness and clumsiness. The girl turned away and quietly said that she had not been attentive enough just now either. The aristocrat looked at the main character carefully and said that her clothes had been damaged by the collision with him. But Judith Maybaum covered her face with her hand and said that nothing terrible had happened. She would change at home and everything would be fine. After these words, the girl quickly went on, saying that she needed to leave urgently to resolve important matters. The noble aristocrat tried to stop the stranger to get to know her better, but this had absolutely no effect on the girl. She continued on her way and instantly disappeared into the city crowd. The nobleman could only follow the stranger with his eyes. After some time, the main character completed all the planned tasks and decided to return home immediately. The girl sold the medicinal herbs that she collected in the forest and bought the boy some tasty food with the money she got, as well as ingredients for the medicine. Just in case, Judith Maybaum decided to look around to rule out persecution from the nobleman she had recently encountered. But it so happened that the main character met her friends and a girl named Leah. Thomas remembered her today during a conversation with Judith Maybaum. This is a rather unexpected meeting. The girl Leah greeted the main character and asked what was in her basket. Judith Maybaum answered that she had bought medicine for her nephew, who was currently ill. But the friend did not believe Luca Winterwald's aunt when she heard these words. She said that Judith Maibaum had made it all up to hide some secret. The main character was not surprised by Leah's reaction to her explanations. After that, Leah said that she had met a handsome aristocrat today who had visited the city of Emden and was asking everyone where Judith Maibaum lived. The main character's friend thought that she had already managed to charm the handsome nobleman and lured him to her place. Judith Maibaum didn't expect to hear that from her friend. She replied that she had never met any aristocrat. The girl couldn't understand why a stranger would want to look for her house. The main character tried to remember when, according to the plotline of her favorite romantic novel, Luca Winterwald's uncle appeared in town. She clearly remembers that the Duke came for his nephew when he was 11 years old, and it did not happen during the May festival. Suddenly, the girl realized that she might be wrong, because Judith Maibaum had taken such poor care of her nephew that she might have forgotten how old he really was. The main character suddenly jumped up and started running to get back home as quickly as possible. She managed to say goodbye to her friend Leah and rushed to her nephew at high speed. Leah doesn't understand why her best friend is so rude and unpredictable and doesn't tell her anything. That's why the girl was very offended by Judith Maibaum when she ran away without explaining anything. The main character is rushing home as fast as she can. She thinks that she will soon go crazy from such a variety of events that happen in such a short period of time. Her life used to be much simpler and quieter. The girl is already out of breath and is very angry with the former Judith Maibaum, who disliked her nephew so much that she forgot his exact age. This is simply terrible, and now the main character will have to pay for it with her life. Judith Maibaum almost reached her house, which was hidden in dense thickets of trees and bushes. But suddenly the girl saw that someone had approached the door of her house and was about to knock on it. The main character froze in place when she saw that the same aristocrat she had bumped into on the street was about to knock on her door. It was just some kind of incredible coincidence. The girl realized that the moment she had been waiting and dreading for so long had arrived. The Duke, whose name was Rudiger Winterwald, had come to take his once-lost nephew and make him the heir of the family. From this fateful moment, Judith Maibaum's life, according to the plot of the novel, must change dramatically. Rudiger Winterwald will take Luca to his estate, and after that, the boy's aunt must die because of her stupidity and greed. The main character looks at the uninvited guest attentively. She calmed down a little and began to think relatively soberly. The girl noticed the fact that Rudiger Winterwald is a very handsome man. Uncle Luca Winterwald looked around. For a moment, the seasoned aristocrat thought that someone was secretly watching him. The main character had to come out of her hiding place and introduce herself to the noble aristocrat because he noticed her. The girl is a little embarrassed in front of such a handsome man. When Judith Maibaum came closer to Rudiger Winterwald, she noticed that the Duke was tall. This fact embarrassed the girl even more and caused some confusion in her feelings. The well-mannered nobleman decided to observe all propriety and took a few steps back from the main character so as not to violate her personal space and not to embarrass her. The main character liked this polite behavior very much. This man behaves differently from the uncouth Thomas. The Duke bowed politely to Judith Maibaum and introduced himself. Then Rudiger Winterwald said that he was glad to meet the main character again after the unfortunate incident that happened in the town square. Judith Maibaum was so excited that at first she did not understand what this noble aristocrat was talking about. She asked Rudiger Winterwald what he meant now. The nobleman smiled and politely reminded his interlocutor of the accidental encounter between them that had occurred a few minutes earlier. The main character understood what was being discussed and was confused by the shame she had experienced. The Duke told the girl that she should not be embarrassed by such a trifle. After that, the nobleman added that in the numerous wars he had been in as a commander, he had found himself in situations more terrible and dangerous than this. After these soothing words from the Duke, Judith Maibaum finally came to her senses and collected her thoughts. The girl realized that it was easy and comfortable for her to communicate with this nobleman. The main character shook the aristocrat's hand, which he politely extended to her to say hello and get to know him better. Judith Maibaum smiled at her new acquaintance and asked what brought this man to her modest home. The man thought for a moment and asked the girl if she knew a man named Jonas Winterwald. The aristocrat's further answer would depend on this. The main character replied that she did not know this man. That was the name of Luca Winterwald's biological father, her nephew. But she decided to lie to the nobleman for now. The girl smiled and looked her interlocutor in the eyes to better understand his intentions. The main character thought about her nephew and his father. She is afraid that by telling the truth, she will doom herself to a quick and painful death. The girl decided to be very careful. After this, Judith Maybaum turned to her interlocutor and said that she did not understand what he was talking about. Perhaps the noble aristocrat had simply gotten the wrong address or something like that. Rudiger Winterwald shook his head and said that there could be no mistake if people who bore the name Maybaum lived in this house. The main character realized that the Duke was very determined and could stand his ground. Therefore, the girl suggested that her interlocutor first go into her house to continue the conversation there. This conversation could be long. While Judith Maybaum entered the house and invited her uninvited guest, she recalled the life story of Rudiger Winterwald, who would become his nephew's main support in the future in the fight against enemies. According to the plot of the romantic novella, in which the girl miraculously appeared, Rudiger Winterwald came to the city of Emden on the day of the May festival. He found his nephew when he was sick with a fever and was all alone at home, abandoned by his aunt. The poor boy had a fever, was hungry and scared of being abandoned when he needed medical and psychological help. It was just awful. On the day of the May festival, Judith Maybaum went out and partied with her friends and boyfriends until the night. When she returned home tipsy, she saw Rudiger Winterwald talking to her nephew and giving him first aid. Uncle Luca Winterwald saw that Judith Maybaum was drunk. This completely threw the noble aristocrat off balance, and he unleashed all his anger on the girl. The enraged Duke said that he did not understand how one could treat a child who was left in one's care so badly. After that, the nobleman decisively declared that he was taking his nephew home with him. The stupid, ugly woman with little social responsibility that was Judith Maybaum decided not to give in so easily. She attacked Rudiger Winterwald with accusations that he did not know what she had to endure while raising her nephew. Judith Maybaum added that she had to deny herself many things for many years for the sake of this child, and take on the role of a single mother who cannot arrange her personal life. The impudent girl got very upset and started shouting loudly at the uninvited guest, who had no right to be the boss in her house. Let Rudiger Winterwald go home or pay compensation for his nephew, who cost Judith Maybaum dearly. The noble aristocrat listened attentively to the angry and drunken lady and said that he would pay her compensation for his nephew immediately. But after that, Judith Maybaum would lose all right to interfere in the life of Luca Winterwald. The girl was delighted with such a generous offer and immediately agreed to receive money for her nephew. This incident left a deep emotional wound in the boy's soul, because he hoped that his aunt loved him and would change for the better someday. But these hopes were not destined to come true. Now the main character has a chance to correct the storyline of the novel and rehabilitate Judith Maybaum, doing everything her way. So, this fateful day has come. Rudiger Winterwald is now at Judith Maybaum's house and wants to talk to her about her nephew. Now it's up to the main character to decide what happens next. The girl showed her hospitality to the noble aristocrat and brewed him a fragrant tea from wildflowers. Rudiger Winterwald noticed Judith Maybaum's efficiency and praised the tea she brought him. The main character thought for a minute that now she needed to properly build a conversation with this noble gentleman, and under no circumstances, shift the responsibility for her nephew only onto his shoulders. This is their common nephew, so they both should take care of him. Judith Maybaum decided to start from afar. She turned to the guest and said that she had never heard of Jonas Winterwald before. But the aristocrat did not believe the girl. Rudiger Winterwald said that 5 years ago, Judith Maybaum wrote his brother a long and emotional letter about him having a child named Luca Maybaum. The main character smiled at her interlocutor and said that the letter to Jonas Winterwald was written and sent by her sister Larissa Maybaum shortly before her death. The Duke replied that he did not know this because his brother hid this information and did not say anything about having a son. Now the Winterwald family has learned the whole truth and wants to bring the boy home. It so happened that Jonas Winterwald had recently died after falling from a horse. His younger half-brother Rudiger was sorting through the deceased's things and found a letter from Larissa Maybaum. After that, he decided to find his nephew. The main character pretended to express condolences to her interlocutor about the death of his brother. But in reality, she thought that Jonas Winterwald was a heartless and selfish man who abandoned his child to his fate. Rudiger Winterwald said that the letter he found only had the name Maybaum. That's why the nobleman spent a lot of time searching for the boy. The noble aristocrat apologized for not being able to find his nephew for a long time. But the main character said that he should not apologize. He was not guilty of anything. The Duke asked where the boy was now and what his name was. The girl replied that her nephew's name was Luca and that he was currently sleeping upstairs because he had recently caught a cold. Rudiger Winterwald thought about something when he heard the name of his nephew. It reminded him of something or someone. The main character thought that Luca, according to the plot of the novel, loved his uncle very much. And this is not surprising, because the Duke was well-educated, very handsome in appearance, and always cared for and protected his nephew. Rudiger Winterwald asked his interlocutor what her relation was to the boy. Judith Maibaum happily answered that she was his aunt. The nobleman thought for a moment and decided to ask where Luca Winterwald's mother had gone. This question puzzled the main character a little, but Judith Maibaum quickly pulled herself together and said that the boy's mother had died suddenly 5 years ago from a serious infectious disease. The Duke expressed his condolences to the girl on this occasion. Afterwards, Rudiger Winterwald said that his brother had acted very irresponsibly because he had abandoned his son and his mother. He apologized again for Jones Winterwald's misdeed. The main character did not dramatize the situation. She smiled at her interlocutor and said that in every family there are people who ruin its reputation. Judith Maibaum thought that in her family she had always been the one who caused all the troubles. It even seemed a little funny in the current situation. The main character's interlocutor said that his brother was not married and Luca was his only son. Jonas Winterwald's parents are eagerly awaiting their grandson's return. Judith Maibaum listens attentively to the young Duke. She knows what will happen next, so she calmly waits for the nobleman to begin solving the main issue. Finally, the important moment arrived. The girl's interlocutor collected his thoughts and decided to ask her to take her nephew to the Winterwald estate to raise him there. The main character started to get a little nervous at such a crucial moment in her life, but she quickly pulled herself together and calmed down. The girl looks at her interlocutor attentively. Now she must arrange everything so that the young Duke does not think that Judith Maibaum wants to get rid of her nephew. The main character made a puzzled and sad expression. After that, she told the aristocrat that all this was very unexpected. She didn't even know what to say to him in response. Rudiger Winterwald noticed the embarrassment of his interlocutor and said that he understood her upset feelings. But he would try to create the best conditions for the child in the family estate. The main character continues to play her role. She said that she is not sure if this decision is right and does not know how her nephew will react to it. The noble aristocrat listened carefully to Judith Maibaum and said that he felt guilty for putting her in such an awkward situation. The girl thought for a moment and said that she needed time to think about the matter. Rudiger Winterwald could come tomorrow to get an answer and see his nephew. The main character's interlocutor said that she had suggested a wonderful idea. He would come to this house tomorrow to tell Luca Winterwald everything himself. At this point, the conversation ended, and Rudiger Winterwald went out into the street to get into his carriage and head home. Judith Maibaum wished the nobleman a good journey. The girl watched the young Duke's carriage drive away into the distance and felt that she was under incredible emotional stress. After this, the main character returned to the house and began to think about the situation. Judith Maibaum feels that she did everything right, but this is only the beginning of the performance. Evening has come. The main character has prepared a delicious dinner and given medicine to her nephew. Luca Winterwald feels better and has regained his appetite. The boy was very hungry while he was sick and lying in bed. He really liked the dish his aunt cooked for dinner today. Judith Maibaum watches her little nephew closely. She doesn't know whether she should hand him over to the young Duke and thus condemn him to a thorny path. The main character hasn't told her nephew about Rudiger Winterwald's visit yet. But that's okay. The boy will find out about everything tomorrow. Today, Judith Maibaum wants to enjoy the company of Luca Winterwald, who will leave her tomorrow. And perhaps the main character will never see him again. The main character is sad. She has already become attached to her nephew. Their relationship has begun to improve, and the girl is sorry to part with the boy. But she will not be able to give him what he will receive in noble society. The Winterwald family would never give up their only heir. Therefore, it is completely pointless for a poor and lowly girl to compete with them. The main character surrounded Luca with her care only a month ago, but already fell in love with him very much. The girl will never understand the cruel attitude of the former Judith Maibaum towards the boy. Luca Winterwald looks up from his meal and notices that something is wrong with his aunt. The boy wants to know what happened to her. When he asked Judith Maibaum why she was sad and not eating her delicious dinner, the girl was a little confused. She just didn't know what to say to this sweet child. The main character collected her thoughts and answered the boy that she was fine. She was just a little tired. Today had been quite a stressful day. After that, the girl slapped herself on the cheeks to cheer herself up and told herself that she couldn't let herself get weak and relax. The time had not come for that yet. Judith Maibaum pulled herself together and smiled at her nephew. She said that he had a great appetite and very nice and soft cheeks. This slightly embarrassed the boy, who considered himself an adult. That was how the evening went. The next morning arrived, and Rüdiger Winterwald did not keep us waiting long. He arrived at Judith Maibaum's house and immediately informed his nephew who he was. At first, Luca Winterwald did not believe the noble stranger that he was his uncle. But the main character intervened in the conversation to clarify the situation. The girl hastened to confirm the words of Rüdiger Winterwald and said that he was the boy's uncle, who wanted to take him to his family castle. But for some reason, the child became very sad, upset, and quiet. The main character turned to the boy and asked him to be polite with the noble stranger. Luca Winterwald thought for a moment and said that he was not at all like this unknown uncle. Therefore, he could not be his relative. Judith Maibaum laughed and decided to soften the situation. She said that she, too, looked little like her nephew. But that didn't mean anything. But Luca Winterwald decided otherwise. He looked at the noble stranger with distrust and said that he could not be his relative. This was all some kind of mistake or a stupid joke. The main character looked closely at her nephew and only now realized that events began to develop according to a different scenario than in her favorite novel. Judith Maibaum began to think quickly about the situation. Maybe she should have quarreled with Rüdiger Winterwald and not given the boy to him. But that would have been too much. An aristocrat intervened in the conversation. He told his nephew that he was very similar to his father. But he and his uncle were not alike. Luca Winterwald listened attentively to the stranger and thought that it was all too complicated for him. The boy did not change his opinion about his uncle. Then Rüdiger Winterwald decided to take a different approach. He put his hand in the inside pocket of his uniform to take out a medallion with a portrait of his brother. The stranger showed the boy a portrait of Jonas Winterwald. He really did look like the child, like 2 peas in a pod. This puzzled Luca and made him think. The main character also saw the portrait of Jonas Winterwald and immediately admired the beauty of this noble aristocrat. Luca Winterwald picked up his father's portrait and looked at it carefully. The boy's soul was still struggling with conflicting feelings. Judith Maibaum leaned toward her nephew and said that his father's family had a high position in society and enormous wealth. The girl added that now the boy will never have to go hungry again and he will be able to learn everything he wants. Rüdiger Winterwald confirmed the words of the main character. Luca Winterwald thought for a moment and asked what would happen to his aunt if he left her. Judith Maibaum said that she would remain at home alone. Suddenly, the boy ran up to Judith Maibaum and hugged her tightly. He burst into tears and called her his mother. This greatly puzzled the main character, who did not expect such a turn of events. Rüdiger Winterwald watches the scene closely and does not know how to react to all this. It seems that there will be difficulties with the child's move to the family estate. The main character is also confused. She is trying to figure out how events will develop further if her nephew stays with her. This is all a very dangerous story. The situation became almost unsolvable in an instant. No one except the child knows what to do now and what this could mean for everyone present. Judith Maibaum looked at her nephew in confusion and told him that she was his aunt, not his mother. She did not understand why the boy called her that, but Luca Winterwald doesn't want to listen to any persuasion or admonition. He hugs the main character tightly, calls her his mother again, and asks her not to leave him. After this, the child began to cry again and said that from now on he would call the main character aunt, but he did not want her to abandon him or give him to someone else. Rüdiger Winterwald decided to intervene in the situation. He coughed meaningfully and asked the girl if she hadn't told the boy that she was his aunt, not his mother. The main character answered the noble aristocrat that she always told the child who she was. She herself was very surprised by such unusual behavior of her nephew. Rüdiger Winterwald looked closely at his nephew and his governess. He said that he did not quite understand what was happening now, but that something had to be done immediately. After that, the nobleman thought for a while and made an important decision. He said that he could not break the bond between mother and child. Therefore, he would have to take both of them to the family estate. This decision came as a huge surprise to the main character. She did everything to avoid contact with the Winterwald family. But now she has to live in their family castle. It's terrible. The girl immediately pulled herself together because her life was at stake. She smiled at the Duke and said that she could not go to the family castle. She was happy here. Luca Winterwald intervened in the conversation. He looked at his aunt and said that she always dreamed of living like a princess in a huge and luxurious palace. In her defense, Judith Maybaum said that she had always been an advocate of a modest and quiet life. But the boy did not believe it and said that it was all untrue. After this, Luca Winterwald turned to the noble stranger who called himself his uncle and stuck out his tongue at him, teasing him. This impudent act of her nephew made Judith Maybaum laugh. She laughed but asked the boy to behave decently. In addition, the girl added that the desire to live richly is inherent in most people. It is quite normal. The main character decided to have a serious talk with her nephew. She told the boy that she had lived in Emden all her life. She had many friends here and a home that she did not want to leave. Luca Winterwald listened carefully to his aunt and again did not believe her. He burst into tears and said that Judith Maybaum was dreaming of getting rid of him so that she could quickly marry the first man she met. After this, the boy pointed his finger at the young duke and said that he did not want to be given to this suspicious man. It would be better if a huge stone fell on his head. Rudiger Winterwald listens to his nephew's emotional words and cannot believe his ears. The young duke understands that he must urgently come up with something to persuade the child to go with him. The nobleman looked at Luca Winterwald very sternly. Even the main character was frightened by this strong look, and she does not know what to do now to correct the current situation. And at this critical moment, Rudiger Winterwald came up with something original. He said that Judith Maybaum could find herself a husband on the Winterwald family estate if she wanted to get married soon. The boy supported this great idea and said that it would be better for everyone. But the main character said that she was not planning to get married. The girl began to get very nervous, realizing that her situation was getting worse. She told her nephew that she would be out of place if she found herself in the company of noble aristocrats. The main character added that her position in society was too small and pitiful. The nobles would oppress her and consider her a second-class person. Nothing good would come of it, but the clever boy figured out how to reassure his aunt. He said that Judith Maybaum was the woman who raised the Winterwald family's only heir in proud solitude. That was worthy of all respect. The main character did not expect such ingenuity from her 10-year-old nephew. She looks at the child and does not know what to answer him. Suddenly, Rudiger Winterwald turns to the girl. The nobleman sincerely said that his family would be happy to take care not only of the boy, but also of the woman who had replaced his own mother. The young duke added that one could live in seclusion or among local aristocrats in the family estate. It was as one wished. And all this could be arranged without any particular problems. The nobleman was silent for a moment and said that absolutely anything one wanted was possible in the Winterwald estate. If there was a desire, the means would be found. The main character looks at Rudiger Winterwald with wide eyes. She is discouraged and devastated by such a generous offer. But the girl is haunted by her possible death if she ends up in this estate. Judith Maybaum needs some time to think about the current situation and the offer of the noble aristocrat from the Winterwald family. This will be a very difficult choice for the main character. Rudger Winterwald said that the girl had half an hour to get ready. The carriage was already waiting outside the house. There was no point in delaying. She just needed to pack her things and boldly set out for a new life. The main character very quickly collected the boy's things and her own pitiful belongings. She quickly changed her clothes and is trying to understand what is happening to her now. But for now, the girl feels like she is in some kind of bad dream. Judith Maybaum cries quietly, saying goodbye to her home and cursing her evil fate. Suddenly, she sees her best friend Leah, who quickly walks towards her and calls her. The main character asked her friend what she was doing there and what she needed. All this seemed very inappropriate, strange and suspicious to the girl. It turns out that Leah has come running here to personally ask Judith Maybaum if she will live in a wealthy aristocratic family in the unenviable role of an old and unwanted lady. Rumors quickly spread throughout the small town of Emden. The silly girl Leah expressed her admiration for Judith Maybaum, who had previously told everyone that she dreamed of living among real aristocrats in a luxurious castle. The main character asked the girl to speak more quietly so that Rudiger Winterwald would not hear them. Otherwise, there could be big problems due to stupid rumors and city gossip. At that moment, the noble aristocrat loudly announced to everyone that preparations for the journey were complete, and they could set off for the Winterwald family's ancestral estate. Rudiger Winterwald offered his hand to Judith Maybaum in a decorous and gallant manner in front of her best friend, which almost gave her a heart attack. That stupid and empty girl's envy was so strong. The former Judith Maybaum's best friend watches with envy as the main character gets into a luxurious carriage and heads off to a new luxurious life. Leah has promised herself to achieve the same success in life someday. This stupid girl shouted that her fiancé would be even better than Judith Maybaum's, and he would live in a palace twice the size of Winterwald Castle, not to mention the wealth of the prospective groom. Having poured out her envy and bile to the end, Leah went away. Needless to say, this empty and unremarkable girl will become a princess only in her stupid girlish dreams. Rudiger Winterwald noticed that the main character was upset about something. He asked the girl if her friend was offended by her. But Judith Maybaum does not know what to answer the noble aristocrat. And at that moment, the main character realized that she would not be sad. Let fate decide her life. The girl said that she was fine and happily got into a luxurious carriage. Judith Maybaum took her place in the carriage next to her nephew, and her heart ached from excitement and the unexpectedness of everything that was happening. This made the boy a little wary. Only now did the main character realize that she had forgotten to take Rudiger Winterwald's hand when he had suggested it. She had been distracted by her friend Leah's envious lamentations. The girl felt very uncomfortable because of this. Luca Winterwald noticed that his uncle was lingering near the carriage and was in no hurry to get in. The boy turned to the young duke and hurried him a little. After all, everyone was gathered and it was time to go. The main character noticed her nephew's excessive familiarity and made a fair remark about it. But the boy pretended not to hear anything. Judith Maybaum looked at her nephew and remembered the plot of the romantic novel she found herself in. According to the plot of this work, Luca Winterwald always tried to be very nice when he got to his family castle. The main character thought that on the pages of the novel, this boy was always very kind and sweet, but now he shows his dark side. So, it is necessary to take up his upbringing. Judith Maybaum turned to her pupil and told him that he should call Rudiger Winterwald his uncle and be more polite to him. But the boy again ignored his aunt's words. A few minutes later, all the preparations were finished and the carriage headed to the Winterwald family estate. A new page opens in the life of the main character and her nephew. Judith Maybaum looks absently out the carriage window and thinks about her past life. Maybe it's for the best that things turned out this way and she didn't leave her nephew alone. The crew is racing through the streets of Emden. Suddenly, the main character sees her potential fiancé Thomas, with whom she recently had an unpleasant altercation. Thomas also noticed the girl passing by, whom he secretly loved with all his heart, but did not know how to show it properly. In the eyes of the young man, sadness and regret are read that Judith Maybaum is leaving her hometown. But the main character does not have romantic feelings for the stupid and ill-mannered suitor. She looked at Thomas, and he again reminded her of a rotten potato, which belongs among such specimens. After that, the girl allowed herself to relax a little and thought that, despite her worries about the future, she had no way back. Therefore, she needed to look forward boldly and move on. The young duke's luxurious carriage takes the main character into the unknown to new adventures that are just beginning. But the most important thing for Judith Maybaum is yet to come. It is a struggle for survival in Winterwald Castle among cunning and treacherous aristocrats who are sophisticated and experienced in intrigue and betrayal. The trip has been going on for several hours. Luca Winterwald is sleeping peacefully, sitting on the couch. But the main character is experiencing terrible discomfort. Her legs are numb and she is very seasick. Opposite the girl sits Rudiger Winterwald. He looks completely calm and peaceful. This puzzles the main character very much, because she does not understand how this can be achieved in such extreme conditions. Suddenly, the young duke decided to ask Judith Maybaum an important question. He asked her again if she was Luca's biological mother. This puzzled the girl a little. The main character answered her interlocutor that she was the boy's aunt and nothing more. This issue should not be returned to again, so as not to waste time and energy. The girl also added that she was 27 years old and her nephew was 11. Therefore, she must have given birth to him at 16. That was too much. This argument finally convinced Rudiger Winterwald of the truth of Judith Maybaum's words. The young duke said that he was now convinced of Lady Maybaum's sincerity. That's why he felt very light in his soul. These words surprised the main character. Rudiger Winterwald added that he would explain the situation to his family when he got home. So the girl had nothing to worry about. Judith Maybaum was happy when she heard this. The main character said that Luca never deceives anyone. He called the girl Mom, based on his own reasons. The noble aristocrat replied that he understood everything perfectly. The boy simply did not want to part with the person he loved very much. Judith Maybaum looked at her sleeping nephew. She felt sorry for this unfortunate boy, so she felt a sharp feeling of tenderness towards him. After that, the girl looked at Rüdiger Winterwald and thought that this noble aristocrat would be able to take good care not only of his nephew, but of her as well. Uncle Luca Winterwald also felt a surge of tenderness when he looked at his nephew. He understands that he now has a great responsibility. After this, the nobleman looked closely at the main character and said that now he understood why the boy was so attached to Judith Maybaum. These words greatly surprised and puzzled the girl. Rüdiger Winterwald added that Judith Maybaum takes very good care of her nephew. It seems as if Luca Winterwald is her own son. These words really pleased the main character and made her feel grateful. The noble aristocrat thought for a moment and said that from now on he would follow Judith Maybaum's example. He would consider the boy his own son and treat him accordingly. The nobleman added that they would become wonderful parents for the orphan, who would work together to raise the child into a worthy person. This is a great idea. The main character thought she had misheard. But Rüdiger Winterwald asked the girl how she felt about the idea of becoming parents to a boy. Judith Maybaum looks at the nobleman and does not know what to answer him. The girl thought for a moment and told her interlocutor that he should choose his words more carefully, because he could be misinterpreted. Rüdiger Winterwald does not understand what the main character is talking about. Judith Maybaum hastened to explain everything to her interlocutor. She said that she understood the young duke and his words, which were caused only by concern for the child. But other girls might perceive it as a proposal of marriage. The young nobleman was a little confused when he heard his interlocutor's answer. He realized that he had just made a proposal that could be assessed in two different ways. Rüdiger Winterwald decided to pretend that he didn't understand what was being discussed, and said that he could only make a proposal to raise his nephew together to Judith Maybaum. The girl also pretended that this was all that was being discussed. The main character looked closely at the young duke and thought that he was very lucky. If the old Judith Maybaum were in her place now, the noble young man would already be at her feet and begging for a quick wedding. Rüdiger Winterwald looked out the carriage window and said that they were already approaching the city of Neuhalt. There, the travelers would change to a train and go to the Winterwald family estate. When the travelers arrived in the city, they still had some free time before the train departed, so they decided to stroll through the picturesque streets of Neuhalt and go shopping. Today, Luca Winterwald will discover for himself and those around him that he has the blood of a true aristocrat. But for this, he will have to put in some effort and money. The main character wants to change her nephew's wardrobe. She looks at the child with love and understands that such a handsome boy will suit any style of clothing. The girl also thought about her future. She is not thrilled about the trip to Winterwald Castle, but now she can become a participant in the further events of her favorite novel. This also has a positive side. Rüdiger Winterwald insisted that Judith Maybaum visit one of the most famous and fashionable boutiques. The girl would do well to change her wardrobe to look more presentable. The main character tried on a beautiful purple dress. Her companions looked at her appraisingly and made various comments about the outfit the girl was wearing. Judith Maybaum was already pretty fed up with all this, because the young duke decided to buy the girl a huge number of expensive and beautiful dresses. The main character pointed to a large pile of boxes with dresses and said that this would be enough for her new wardrobe. Rüdiger Winterwald thought for a moment and said that the girl was absolutely right in the current situation. After that, he added that there was no point in wasting precious time trying on dresses. That's why he buys all these dresses at once. The main character said that there was no need for that. But the young duke did not listen to the girl. He called the saleswoman and told her to pack up all the dresses they had tried on. This left Judith Maybaum in a real shock. Suddenly, Luca Winterwald, who was looking at the various models of dresses in the store's catalog, intervened in the conversation. The boy said that his aunt needed to buy a black dress that would emphasize her elegance. Rüdiger Winterwald agreed with his nephew. He looked closely at the main character and said that she should try on a few more dresses to collect a full collection of models for her wardrobe. The girl was already very tired of trying on different outfits. She was not used to it. But she had no choice. Therefore, the main character had to submit to the will of the young duke. A few hours later, the long-awaited moment arrived when the fitting was over. Judith Maybaum breathed a sigh of relief. The saleswoman said that she would take care of delivering all the purchases to the hotel where the travelers were staying. The main character is very tired but continues to hold her own. She told Rüdiger Winterwald that she is ready to follow all his recommendations in order to properly present herself at the Winterwald family castle. The young duke smiled when he heard the girl's words and asked her not to address him so formally. He would be pleased if the main character called him by his first name. Judith Maibaum did not expect such a turn of events. She is very surprised and glad that the noble aristocrat does not suffer from an excessive sense of self-importance. After that, the girl called the young duke by name, looking into his eyes. The nobleman liked it very much, and he praised the main character for it. Rüdiger Winterwald headed towards the exit of the fashion boutique and said that there were still many important things to do today. Luca Winterwald's wardrobe needed to be updated. Judith Maibaum can't believe her ears. She thought she was done shopping for the day, but it turns out she was very wrong. Today will be an interesting and eventful day. The young duke turned around and said that the main character still needed to buy boots and hats for herself. This completely shocked the girl. The main character tried to tell the nobleman that the hats were already included with the dresses she had bought. But the young duke replied that the girl would be able to choose more interesting models for herself in the hat boutique. After this, Rüdiger Winterwald stopped and looked closely at Judith Maibaum. He thought for a moment and asked the girl if it was really so unpleasant for her to receive gifts from him. The main character was stunned when she heard these words. She did not expect that her desire to save the young aristocrat's time and money would be regarded by him as disrespect for him. The confused girl hastened to calm the young duke and assure him that the reason for her refusal was something completely different. The main character understands that it would be better for her to remain silent in this situation. The nobleman looks at his interlocutor attentively and cannot understand what she means. For Rüdiger Winterwald, such behavior of the girl means only hostility towards him. The young duke looked at his interlocutor attentively and said that he very much hoped that this question was now finally and irrevocably resolved. Judith Maibaum would accept from him everything that he bought for her. The girl was embarrassed and said that the nobleman had already done too much for her. Now Rüdiger Winterwald understood what the matter was. He said that for him all these purchases were a mere trifle. Therefore the girl should not feel obligated to him, but the girl is not used to such expensive gifts. She tries to convey this to her interlocutor in such a way that he will not be offended by her and will not think anything unnecessary. But the proud aristocrat didn't even listen to the heroine's excuses. He turned around abruptly and said that it was time for them to continue shopping. There was still a lot to do and time was of the essence. Judith Maibaum watches the nobleman walk away. The girl thinks that this man is a true aristocrat to the core, and this does not always have good manifestations. Excessive pride will not lead to anything good. The main character understands that Rüdiger Winterwald has his own personal code of honor. He is used to spending money without counting it and without taking into account the opinions of others. But this made the girl a little anxious. She doesn't know if she can be herself and live the way she wants if there is this steel-hard aristocrat next to her who doesn't take into account the opinions of others. Luca Winterwald also watches his uncle go. The boy has a tense expression on his face because he also doesn't like the aristocratic arrogance of Rüdiger Winterwald. When the shopping was finished, a huge pile of boxes with various things had accumulated in the traveler's hotel room. The young duke looks thoughtfully at the large pile of purchases. He said that it was enough for a provincial town, which is Neuhalt. But in the capital, this pile would be 2 or 3 times larger. The main character is so tired today that she does not have the strength to argue with the nobleman. Rüdiger Winterwald looked at his watch and said that the first stage of shopping was over. Now it was time to find something for Luca Winterwald. Judith Maibaum couldn't believe her ears. The girl had almost no strength left. But the young duke was determined to continue his clothing shopping. A few minutes later, the travelers were already in a new boutique that sold clothes for boys. The main character immediately began offering her nephew various models of clothes to try on. But the boy showed no enthusiasm when he found himself in the clothing store. Finally, Luca Winterwald got tired of his aunt's excessive care and said that he was ready to choose a suitable suit for himself. He considered himself old enough for this. Judith Maibaum did not contradict the boy, so he went up to the salesperson and asked her to bring him a gray suit, which he wanted to try on right away. The main character tried to interfere again, but the girl's nephew didn't like it at all. He wants to choose his own clothes for the updated wardrobe and doesn't want anyone to tell him. But Judith Maibaum does not calm down. She continues to show excessive concern for her nephew, showing him bright and gaudy costumes that the boy would never wear. Luca Winterwald looks at his aunt and the suits she offers him to try on in surprise. The boy realizes that Judith Maybaum has no aristocratic taste at all. The young man turned away from the suit his aunt offered him and said that it was too bright and would be out of place in polite society. He needed to pick something else. Rudiger Winterwald calmly reads the newspaper and watches everything that happens in the clothing store. He waits to see how his nephew will act in this situation and whether he will be able to show now that he is a true aristocrat by birth. The boy said that he doesn't like original suits. He prefers the classic style, so the seller should find something like that. The main character realized that her proposal was rejected by the child and asked if her taste was really that bad. This upset the girl a little, but she does not take offense at her nephew, understanding the true essence of things. Only now did Judith Maybaum realize why the young duke had not allowed her to choose her own dress. She was not an aristocrat by birth and would not be able to choose a decent outfit for herself. And now, Rudiger Winterwald did not interfere in the process of buying a suit for his nephew, because he had absolute confidence in him. Evening has come. It has been a very productive and eventful day. All the shopping is finally done. Now it is time to go to the hotel to rest. When the travelers arrived at the hotel, the young duke said that they would spend the night there, and tomorrow they would board the train and continue their journey to Winterwald Castle. The boy did a great job with his suit shopping today. He chose a great gray two-piece suit in a classic style. Rudiger Winterwald is very glad that he was right about his nephew and believed in him. The young duke bid his nephew and his governess good night after showing them where their room was. The main character is very tired today. She wants to quickly go to her hotel room and fall into a sweet sleep. The next day, the travelers headed to the station to board the express train and continue their journey. The main character put on a new pink dress, which suited her very well. This was noticed and appreciated by Rudiger Winterwald. The travelers were met at the station by a special employee who made all the necessary arrangements and placed them in a comfortable carriage. Judith Maybaum liked it very much, but there was nothing surprising about this. Having examined the train more closely, the girl noticed the Winterwald family coat of arms on it. After that, Judith Maybaum realized that this express belonged to the family of the young duke. The accompanying railway worker wished the passengers a safe journey when they entered the carriage. The main character did not expect to see such unimaginable luxury, which simply dazzled her and brought her into complete delight. The girl looks at the sparkling compartment and thinks that it reminds her of a whole room in a luxury hotel. In such conditions, the journey must be very comfortable. Luca Winterwald is not very interested in all this rich interior of the carriage. But for his aunt, it was a real revelation. She never thought that it was possible to travel in such a comfortable compartment. The main character remembered the plot of her favorite novel. There, a boy was very interested in trains. The girl remembered how he looked out the window of his carriage and saw that the train opposite had started moving. The young man liked it very much because he had never seen real trains before. The child sat closer to the window to get a better look at the departing express. But it turned out that it was not the train opposite that was moving, but the one in which Luca Winterwald was. He could not understand how such a huge thing could move without the use of horses. The intrigued boy turned to his uncle and asked him for permission to take a closer look at the train they were about to set off on. Rudiger Winterwald said he supported the child's desire to gain new knowledge and broaden his horizons. The main character returned to the harsh reality and stopped remembering the plot of the novel. Now the boy behaves differently. He is not at all interested in the train they are on. Judith Maybaum understands that the reason for this is that Luca Winterwald is embarrassed and avoids his uncle, whom he does not trust because he wanted to separate him from his beloved aunt. The girl tried to cheer up and distract her nephew from his sad thoughts. She leaned towards the boy and asked him if he wanted to look at this wonderful train they were currently on. The child frowned and thought. On the one hand, he really wanted to know more about this beautiful machine, but he felt awkward around the young duke. So he behaved very reservedly and secretively. Luca Winterwald finally decided to inspect the train. He stood up from his seat and said that he would be back soon. But the main character noticed that the boy was doing all this without much enthusiasm. Rudiger Winterwald gave a general outline of where and what was on this luxurious express. The boy listened attentively and said that he was ready for an independent tour of the train. Luca Winterwald added that he was old enough for this and would not be staying long, so he would return soon. The boy also promised not to disturb the driver and other railway workers. After that, the child ran down the corridor of the carriage to explore the train. The main character and the young duke watch their nephew run away. They think about the boy and his behavior. The girl decided to discuss the matter with Rüdiger Winterwald. She told the aristocrat that her nephew was behaving so independently and boldly, not because he did not like his uncle. There was a completely different reason, but the young duke smiled and said that he was not too worried. At least the boy was behaving decently. At that age, Jonas Winterwald was known throughout the country as a desperate hooligan, so everything was not as bad as it might seem at first glance. Rüdiger Winterwald sat down on a soft chair and invited the main character to go with him on a tour of the train, in which they are now traveling to the family castle. But the girl refused, because she still feels tired after yesterday's shopping trips to clothes shops. The girl looked at her interlocutor carefully and only now realized that he was calling her Mrs. Maybaum. The main character believes that this is too formal an address for relatives, which they are. Judith Maybaum told the young duke that they were related, even if not by blood. But the girl felt uncomfortable when the aristocrat called her too formally, so he too could call the main character by her first name. The young duke was very pleased that Judith Maybaum suggested that he call her by her first name. This would bring the young people even closer together and help them take better care of their common nephew. Rüdiger Winterwald is very well-mannered. He politely thanked his interlocutor for allowing him to address her without unnecessary ranks. This is a very good sign of trust and affection for a person. The young duke admitted that he was a little nervous about the way things were going. He hadn't known Judith Maybaum a few days ago, and now he was going to the family estate with her and planning to raise their nephew together. The main character was a little embarrassed and confused when she heard the revelations of the noble aristocrat. But the girl agrees with the words of her interlocutor. She is experiencing something similar now. Judith Maybaum also decided to make a confession to the young duke. She blushed with embarrassment and said that she had noticed the simple fact that they had become quite close people in a very short period of time. The main character lowered her head when she said these words and became very embarrassed. The girl likes the young duke. She thinks he is a very handsome and strong man. But Judith Maybaum may die if she gets close to Rüdiger Winterwald. The noble aristocrat feels all this intuitively, but he cannot know that in front of him sits a girl who pretends to be someone other than who she really is. The main character also remembers the plot of the romantic novella she found herself in. She knows that Rüdiger Winterwald has always been against marriage. He believes that a real man should devote himself only to war and not vegetate under a woman's skirt. It is for this reason that the young duke cannot inherit his parents' lands. Therefore, the only heir is now Luca Winterwald. The main character just remembered all these details of the plotline of her favorite novel and became sad. How she wished that this beautiful aristocrat would change his attitude towards women and become interested in her. Judith Maybaum thought about the behavior of her interlocutor, which he has been showing for the last few days. It all differs greatly from the image of the cold and hard aristocrat, as he was in the novel. It is all very strange. Maybe Rüdiger Winterwald is just pretending for his own purposes. The girl thought that there was something else hidden in the young duke's behavior. He was never a hypocrite, and, as befits a true warrior, always spoke frankly about everything. Meanwhile, Luca Winterwald returned to the compartment. The main character noticed that her nephew returned to his carriage after the train tour. But for some reason, the boy came sad and thoughtful. Luca Winterwald frowned and showed with his whole appearance that he was bored. Judith Maybaum watched her nephew attentively and thought about how to amuse him. The aunt turned to the boy and asked him why he was so gloomy and sad. But the nephew answered that he was perfectly fine. He was just not in the mood. This puzzled the girl. The main character really doesn't like the fact that her nephew has started to avoid her again. She thought she had found the key to this child's heart, but now he has started to withdraw into himself again, avoiding communication with his aunt. Judith Maybaum sits on her soft compartment sofa and is sad. She does not understand what is happening now and why fate constantly presents her with unpleasant surprises. The main character understands that she has nothing to blame Luca Winterwald for. Over the past month, the girl has managed to experience all the delights of being in this fantasy world without the support of others. Living here in complete solitude is very difficult. The girl remembered that in this fairy tale world, there are not even washing machines. Therefore, ordinary washing turns into a whole adventure of the soul and body. And I have to clean my house without a vacuum cleaner and effective cleaning products that make cleaning much easier. It's just awful. The main character also remembered that there were no gas or electric stoves to cook food on. The girl had to cook for a whole month using a brick oven. Judith Maybaum hopes that life in Winterwald Castle will become much easier, because all the dirty work there will be done by numerous experienced maids who know their business well and are always ready to carry out any order of their masters. This is an ideal life for those people who love various pleasures and shun physical labor. But such an existence has its drawbacks. For example, at any moment you can become a victim of a conspiracy of enemies and die at the hands of a hired killer. All these thoughts came flooding into the main character at once. She was a little confused, but quickly gathered her strength and decided to think only about good things. And then we'll see. Life will put everything in its place. The girl also thought that she had experienced too much emotional stress over the past few days. Therefore, she needed to follow an information diet to avoid going crazy. Judith Maybaum calmed down a little and remembered the plot of her favorite novel. The first attempt on her and her companions' lives was to be made on this train. Therefore, she had to assess the situation soberly, remain calm, and be careful. The main character thought that the beginning of her favorite novel, which is called The Master of the Winter Forest, reminds her of the happy story of the main character's recovery. Luca Winterwald regains his family, title, wealth, and becomes a worthy nobleman thanks to his uncle and aunt. But fate will have it that the happy boy will sink to the very bottom of life again. Rudiger Winterwald will do everything in his power, but his enemies will eventually prevail over him. Luca Winterwald's uncle swore to protect him to the last drop of blood and fulfilled his promise, meeting his death in battle with the treacherous conspirators who had usurped power in Winterwald Castle. The main character thought about the assassination attempt that was supposed to happen on this train. According to the plot of the romantic novel, Rudiger Winterwald will be able to protect his nephew and neutralize the hired killer. Judith Maybaum has analyzed all the information available to her. Now the girl knows the name of the person who ordered the assassination attempt on her nephew, but the main character needs evidence to bring charges against the criminal. The main villain is named Franz Birkenisch. He is a relative of Rudiger Winterwald and his nephew. This aristocrat has long dreamed of seizing power in the Winterwald Castle. The assassin will die during the assassination attempt on the train at the hands of Rudiger Winterwald. The noble aristocrat will shoot the villain and will not learn the name of the person who ordered the crime. The main character thought that she needed to do everything possible to save the life of the hired killer. Then he would be able to reveal the name of the customer, which would help to collect the necessary evidence against Franz Birkenisch. The girl stopped thinking about the upcoming assassination attempt on her nephew and looked around to clear her head a little. Judith Maybaum noticed Rudiger Winterwald and his nephew. They are reading newspapers now, and at this moment they look very similar to each other. Now the main character is 100% sure that they are close relatives. The girl found all this very funny. She smiled and thought that the young duke would be a wonderful father to her nephew. They only needed to get along well. After that, the main character asked Luca Winterwald if he was having fun now. The boy was carefully reading a fresh newspaper and did not want to be distracted from reading. He behaved like a real aristocrat. That's what natural heredity means. Luca answered his aunt in a businesslike manner that he did not like being distracted from reading. The main character smiled and thought that this smart and handsome boy was behaving as if he had already become an adult. But suddenly, a strange but important thought struck Judith Maybaum. The girl wondered if her little nephew could read. She didn't know for sure, because she had never looked into the matter. The main character asked the boy if he could read. The young man replied that he knew all the letters, but he was pretty bad at putting them together to form words. He wanted to learn to read faster so he could get a decent education. The girl was very surprised by this fact, because she had never taught the boy to read and write before. She cannot understand how her nephew learned the alphabet and learned to read by syllables. In the main character's favorite novel, her nephew was educated at Winterwald Castle under the watchful guidance and supervision of experienced teachers. But now everything happens differently than in the book. The main character decided to test Luca Winterwald's knowledge. She asked him to read something out loud to her. The boy was a little embarrassed, but agreed to show what he was capable of. The girl expected to hear a coherent and meaningful text from her nephew, but he began to make up stories on the fly, as if he was reading them in a newspaper. The main character noticed this. Judith Maybaum approached the child and asked him not to waste time on nonsense and to read the text written in the newspaper properly. But Luca Winterwald replied that he was already reading what was written in the newspaper. The girl didn't believe the boy and asked him for a newspaper to see for herself. She doesn't understand how a normal printed publication can print such nonsense as her nephew just said. A few seconds later, Judith Maybaum realized that the boy had just read a cheap tabloid newspaper that publishes only gossip and unverified information. The main character crumpled up the yellow newspaper and said that the child should not read such nonsense that was written in it. The girl does not understand what this horrible filth that tries to claim the title of a news publication is doing here. Rudiger Winterwald decided to satisfy his companion's curiosity and replied that this newspaper had a very dubious reputation. But it had to be bought for the train passengers because they liked to read it. The main character was very angry about this. She told the young duke that she no longer wanted to see this yellow press near her nephew because it was a terrible source of information that traumatized the fragile child's psyche. Rudiger Winterwald was embarrassed and apologized for his oversight. Next time, he would make sure that his nephew did not come into contact with such things that could harm him. The main character looked carefully at the compartment and found a wonderful children's book with colorful pictures, which would be very useful for the boy now. The girl handed her nephew this book and said that he should read only such literature that will teach him many wonderful things that will be very useful in life. The boy looks at the children's book and does not show much enthusiasm. He likes the newspaper more. Judith Maybaum watches the disappointed child closely. She continues to insist on her own and says that children should not be given biased sources of information. In addition, the aunt told her nephew that he must read this book from beginning to end. She promised that she would check the boy's knowledge of the contents of this work later. After that, the main character decided to read a little of the newspaper that she had just crumpled and forbidden the boy to read. Perhaps this would give her the necessary information that could be useful in the future. Judith Maybaum found that the tabloid newspaper had a lot of information about Jonas Winterwald, who had already died but still stirred the minds of the aristocracy. He had always been a bright and unpredictable representative of his family, who was often talked about by those around him. He was also very much loved by women. When Jonas Winterwald died in an accident, his younger brother Rudiger Winterwald became the heir to the family. But the young lord's stance on marriage with women prevented him from becoming the rightful heir to the family estate. Also, a major role in this was played by the contract with the royal family, which included an agreement on the right to build a railway. This became a source of great conflict. The thing is, in this fantasy world, the railroads were just beginning to be built, and they became a source of huge profits for their owners. But the royal family allocated very few available contracts for railroad construction. A fierce struggle immediately began between the aristocrats for this precious right, which would ensure a comfortable future for many generations of their descendants. Eventually, the right to build the railways was seized by the ducal house of Winterwald. The current head of the family, Lord Maximilian, managed to win the auction. This made him the richest man in the kingdom, but also added many new enemies to the duke. According to the terms of the contract that was concluded with the royal family, Maximilian Winterwald was obliged to marry Princess Vanessa. Thus, the railway business remained in the royal family. The contract also included another mandatory condition that the Winterwald family had to fulfill. Only a blood relative of the royal family could become the heir to their line. But shortly after Jonas Winterwald was born, Princess Vanessa died of illness, leaving Jonas as the only possible heir until he had children. After the death of his first wife, Maximilian Winterwald married Princess Vanessa's lady-in-waiting, whose name was Sophie. Sometime later, she gave birth to Rudiger Winterwald, who was not a blood relative of the royal family. Therefore, he could not inherit Winterwald Castle and the railway business. After Jonas Winterwald's death, his son by Larissa Maybaum became the sole heir to Winterwald Castle and all its wealth. But now Luca Winterwald doesn't know about this yet, and quietly reads a children's book that his aunt gave him. The main character continues to read the disgusting tabloid newspaper and thinks about the future. The girl thought that Rudiger Winterwald could marry the king's second daughter, with whom he is friends. This would be the best outcome for everyone. The main character reads that all the noble brides of the kingdom dream of marrying Rudiger Winterwald, but they may soon be disappointed, because he may marry the king's youngest daughter. The girl did not have time to finish reading the article, and felt that someone abruptly and unceremoniously snatched the newspaper from her hands. She was very surprised by such indecent behavior. It turned out that Luca Winterwald saw his aunt reading the tabloids. He doesn't understand why Judith Maybaum is reading the newspaper she forbade him to read. So the boy unceremoniously took the newspaper from his aunt. The main character asked her nephew to return the newspaper to her because she really wants to finish the article that she did not have time to finish. In addition, Judith Maybaum added that she is already an adult and has every right to do so, unlike Luca Winterwald. But the impudent boy did not listen to his aunt. He firmly grabbed the tabloid newspaper, which he took from the girl, and quickly ran out of the compartment. The main character did not have time to do anything about it. Judith Maybaum again asked her nephew to return the newspaper to her because she was conducting a preliminary investigation into future crimes that had not yet been committed but were about to happen. Rüdiger Winterwald intervened in the conversation. He was interested in the girl's words about possible crimes and their investigation. The young Duke asked the girl what information exactly she was trying to find in the newspaper. The main character realizes that she has said too much and tries to soften the situation. She tells the nobleman that she just wants to know how things are going in the kingdom and in Winterwald Castle. The young Duke listened attentively to his interlocutor and said that the yellow press was not the best source for studying information of this kind. Such newspapers only printed gossip and rumors. After these words, Rüdiger Winterwald added that the main character can find out from him all the information that interests her. He will gladly tell the girl everything he knows about it. Judith Maybaum was very happy and asked the young Duke to tell her frankly what stage his relationship with the king's youngest daughter was at and whether he was planning to marry her soon. This question confused and puzzled Rüdiger Winterwald because he did not expect to hear it from his interlocutor. The young Duke thought that the girl would ask him something about state affairs. The main character immediately realized that she had put the aristocrat in a very awkward position and tried to justify herself by saying that he himself had suggested that they talk frankly about what interested her. The young people found themselves in a rather unusual and difficult situation. Now they need to figure out how to solve this problem and diffuse the tense situation. Rüdiger Winterwald was the first to come to his senses. He smiled at the girl and asked if the newspapers were really writing articles about the relationship between the young Duke and the king's youngest daughter. The main character answered that this was true. The young aristocrat said that all this was idle fabrication by unscrupulous journalists who simply wanted to make money on a false sensation. This information did not correspond to reality. Judith Maybaum plucked up her courage and said that the young Duke now needed to marry the young princess to fulfill the contract that had been made with the royal family. But the nobleman replied that there was no such need at the moment because there was Luca Winterwald. The main character looked closely at her interlocutor and said, "Wouldn't his marriage to the king's youngest daughter be the best option in the current situation?" The girl thought that Duke Maximilian Winterwald was already 60 years old. In the current situation, changing the Duchess would be absolutely pointless. If Rüdiger Winterwald publicly renounces his intention to marry, then the old Duke will have to look for another candidate to marry and inherit Winterwald Castle and its wealth. Franz Birkenisch is the closest relative after the young Duke who can fulfill the terms of the royal contract. Now everything became clear to the main character. All the intrigues against Luca Winterwald come from Franz Birkenisch, who hopes to get his hands on the Winterwald family estate and all their untold wealth. The boy's return to the family has upset all the cards of the insidious aristocrat. Luca Winterwald is an illegitimate child, but he has royal blood in his veins, and according to the terms of the contract, this is quite enough to fulfill them. The main character understands that now she will have to deal not only with Luca and Rüdiger Winterwald, but also with Franz Birkenisch, who will constantly plot and conspire against her small and defenseless nephew. Judith Maybaum thought that Rüdiger Winterwald should marry the king's youngest daughter. Then he would be invulnerable to Franz Birkenisch, because this wily nobleman is not so stupid as to fight the royal family. Apparently, Franz Birkenisch is going to get rid of Rüdiger and Luca Winterwald before the young Duke marries the young princess. If that is even possible. The main character decided to take this fact into account. Rüdiger Winterwald looks closely at his companion, who is pondering the fate of his family. He cannot know what this clever girl is thinking, but he can guess. The young Duke thought for a moment and asked the main character if she really wanted him to marry the king's youngest daughter. The nobleman added that in that case, the rights to Winterwald Castle would be inherited by the child who would be born from this marriage. Luca Winterwald would fade into the background. The main character listened carefully to her interlocutor and thought that Luca Winterwald would not be happy if he turned out to be the only heir to his family castle. Judith Maybaum said that she and her nephew were not heading to the Winterwald estate for titles and riches. They simply wanted to meet Luca Winterwald's relatives. The young Duke was a little taken aback when he heard these words. He was ashamed that he had just thought only of the pressing matters and had forgotten to think about the spiritual reasons for his nephew's return. The main character looked closely at her interlocutor and thought that he becomes even more handsome and attractive when he is embarrassed. The girl thought for a moment and said that she did not care about the titles and wealth that her nephew might receive. She only wanted the boy to become a worthy person and grow up in a peaceful environment. Rudiger Winterwald admired the words of his interlocutor and told her that she was a wonderful aunt to her nephew, and he respected her very much for this. These words confused the girl a little. She said that the young duke would also become a great uncle to his young nephew one day. But it would take a little time. The aristocrat liked the encouraging words of his interlocutor. He thought about it and asked the main character if she really thought so. The girl replied that she really thought Rudiger Winterwald was a wonderful uncle who could protect the boy from any adversity. The nobleman was very happy to hear such words from the main character. Judith Maibaum feels that she has chosen the right way to communicate with Rudiger Winterwald. She believes that one must communicate openly with this nobleman. At that moment, Luca Winterwald quietly returned to the compartment. The boy heard the content of the conversation that had just taken place between the main character and her companion. Suddenly, the boy started to act up and told his relatives to stop this stupid conversation. He would decide for himself who would be his real uncle. The main character made a remark to her nephew and said that now was not the time for unfounded grievances and childish whims. But the boy replied that he wanted to decide his own fate. After these words, Luca Winterwald looked at the young duke and said that he was shamelessly flirting with his aunt. True aristocrats do not behave like that. Rudiger Winterwald was very embarrassed when he heard this. He does not know what to answer his young nephew. Judith Maibaum told the boy that he was talking nonsense. It was not proper for the heir of the Winterwald family to behave like that and talk nonsense, but Luca Winterwald doesn't want to be an obedient child. He tells the girl not to interfere in the conversations of two grown men who are sorting things out. After this, the boy again turned to the young duke and asked what kind of relationship connected him and Judith Maibaum, that they were already talking about marriage. The main character decided to calm the presumptuous child down a bit and hit him on the head with her hand. The girl said that an 11-year-old child should not interfere in the affairs of adults. After this, the aunt told her nephew that he was an ungrateful child who should have been glad that Judith Maibaum and the young duke had a wonderful relationship. The girl added that they talked only about the boy while he was wandering around the train. He should be more respectful to his older relatives. Judith Maibaum thought for a moment and said that Luca Winterwald needed to stop arguing with his uncle, who had spent a lot of effort and money to find him and bring him home. Having finished her speech, the main character asked her nephew if he had finished reading the book she had given him today. The boy was embarrassed and answered negatively. The girl said that Luca Winterwald could sit down on the sofa next to his aunt and read her a book. She would be very pleased. The boy froze in indecision, but after a few seconds, the main character's nephew decided that he would read to his aunt the book she had given him today. The situation was such that it was better not to anger Judith Maibaum and do whatever she said. The child began to read the story, and the main character froze in amazement. Luca Winterwald turned out to be a wonderful reader at the age of 11. The girl cannot understand where he learned to read so well. Judith Maibaum thought that her nephew's phenomenal ability to learn could only be explained by the fact that he was the main character in this whole story, in which she had miraculously found herself. When the boy finished reading, the main character suggested that they read another book together, which she had just found in the compartment. Luca Winterwald was interested in this proposal. The child calmly took the new book from his aunt's hands and began to read it expressively. The girl's admiration knew no bounds when she heard her nephew's wonderful reading. Rudiger Winterwald also really liked the way the child read. The aristocrat saw this as further confirmation that he had not been mistaken about the boy, and that he was a true member of the Winterwald family. A few minutes later, Judith Maibaum found another book and offered it to her nephew. The girl was very pleased to hear this precocious child read. Suddenly, a very strange but important thought came into the heroine's head. The girl wants to ask the young duke what will happen to her nephew's inheritance rights if she wants to get married. Judith Maibaum looked carefully at her happy and busy companions and decided not to bother them with questions of this kind for now. Now was the time for good deeds. But the main character finds it very difficult to restrain herself because she considers this question to be very important and influencing the further development of events in her favorite romantic novel. Evening has come. The train continues its journey to Winterwald Castle. The main character is very tired today and tries to sleep, sitting on a comfortable sofa in the compartment, but her stomach hurts. Luca Winterwald noticed that his aunt was not feeling well and went to her to help and support her in her difficult moment. The girl said that she had eaten stale bread today, which she could not digest. But in reality, Judith Maybaum thinks her stomach hurts because of the amount of stress she has experienced over the past few days. In addition, the main character expects the imminent appearance of a hired killer who will attempt to kill Luca Winterwald and his uncle. But the girl does not know the exact time of this event. She only remembers that it will happen during the traveler's meal. Luca Winterwald is very worried about his beloved aunt's health. He suggested that she take some medicine for indigestion or call a doctor at the next station. But the main character hurried to calm the upset boy. She said that she would soon feel much better if she massaged a special point on her hand. After that, the girl showed the child how to do it. Suddenly, a young duke came up to Judith Maybaum and took her hand. He wanted to help the girl get rid of her stomach pain as soon as possible. So the nobleman asked which point on the heroine's hand he needed to massage. The girl did not expect such a turn of events. Rüdiger Winterwald began to massage a special point on her hand so that the pain in her stomach would go away. But due to excitement and inexperience, the young duke pressed the special point too hard. Therefore, the main character screamed in pain and asked the nobleman to immediately stop his massage. The young lord was a little confused and asked the girl what he had done wrong. He had never massaged a special point on his hand to relieve someone's pain before. Judith Maybaum replied that the young man had done everything right, but his efforts had been excessive. Therefore, the special point had become a sore point. This must be understood. Be that as it may, the main character felt relieved after this impromptu massage. The girl already began to smile and flirt with Rüdiger Winterwald. The young duke asked his interlocutor if everything was all right with her. The girl replied that her stomach almost didn't hurt anymore, but her arm still made itself felt after the massage the nobleman had given her. Judith Maybaum saw a hidden opportunity in this and decided to ask Rüdiger Winterwald to massage the special point on her hand again, but not so strongly and forcefully. Suddenly, the main character's nephew decided to intervene in the situation. He noticed that his aunt and uncle had resumed their open flirting. So the clever boy decided to massage a special point on Judith Maybaum's hand himself. The young man signaled to his uncle that he could leave and attend to his own affairs. Luca Winterwald would take care of his beloved aunt's health. And that was not up for discussion. The main character smiled, looking at everything that was happening between her nephew and the young lord. She thought that the boy loved her very much and would always protect her. Luca Winterwald took his aunt's hand and began to gently massage a special point on it that would finally remove the pain in her stomach. The girl looks closely at her nephew and is proud of him. A few minutes later, the main character asked the boy if he could press the special point harder. Now he needs to put in more effort to get the full effect of the treatment. The child tried to press with all his might, but the girl said that this effort would not be enough. They had to think of another way to do acupressure. Otherwise, the main character's stomach would hurt again. Judith Maybaum pretended that she was getting worse and that her stomach was hurting again. The boy was a little confused and didn't know what to do in this situation. The young duke watches everything that is happening. He looks at his confused nephew and begins to understand that the main character deliberately performed this whole performance so as not to offend her nephew. Rüdiger Winterwald leaned over to the girl and offered his services as a masseur. The main character said that she would allow the young duke to give her a point massage. Now the situation has developed in such a way that the girl will receive the necessary treatment, the young lord will court the main character, and the boy will not be offended by anyone for this. After a few seconds of massage, Rüdiger Winterwald decided to take off his black gloves to make the treatment more comfortable and effective. The main character looks at the young duke in surprise. She does not remember a single time when he took off his gloves in front of her. Sometimes the girl feels that they have become part of his skin, because he takes them off only before going to bed. Judith Maybaum looked her companion in the eye and said that she felt very awkward about the situation. But the young lord said that he felt awkward because he had not taken the court physician with him on the journey. Luca Winterwald watches closely the flirting relatives, who may have forgotten at this moment that their nephew is in the compartment. Several minutes passed like this. Suddenly, someone knocked sharply on the compartment door. Rüdiger Winterwald, in a displeased voice, told the uninvited guest to enter the room. The train attendant opened the compartment door and asked when he should be served the dinner he had prepared. The young duke's favorite dishes would be on the menu today. Rüdiger Winterwald turned to the main character and asked if she would be able to handle the entire menu for dinner tonight. The girl replied that she would not eat that much today because she did not want to overload her stomach too much. The young duke told the train conductor that he should bring a light soup for the lady and something more substantial for him and his nephew. The conductor said that he would do everything right away. The main character looked at the young lord and thought about how he didn't even look at the train conductor when he made his order. This made the girl a little wary and reminded her that she was of too low birth to marry Rudiger Winterwald. Judith Maibaum thought that this handsome young man who was now massaging her hand was a noble aristocrat, but he was different from other noblemen. The girl could not yet understand what was going on, but she felt it with her feminine intuition. The main character thought again about her nephew, who really needs her. She looked at the smart boy and promised herself to always be there for him. The girl only now realized that for her there is no difference between the real and fantasy worlds, because she lives for her little nephew, whom she loves very much, and it is mutual. The main character has obligations and goals that she must fulfill, but she finds it very difficult to fit into the local caste system. The young duke continues to massage a special point on Judith Maibaum's hand. He is doing much better than he did half an hour ago. The main character continues to think about her nephew's future and her place in this world. The main character also noticed that the touch of the young aristocrat who massaged her hand brought her great pleasure. She was able to completely relax, lying on a comfortable sofa. A few minutes later, the train conductor brought a wonderful dinner for the travelers. It was time to fortify themselves with tasty and healthy food. The main character had difficulty getting up from her couch when Rudiger Winterwald called her to the table to eat some light chicken soup and gain strength. This upset the boy a little, who was worried about his aunt. The girl gathered her strength and headed to the dining table. She felt that she was not hungry at all now. This was a consequence of her recent illness, but it will definitely pass. She just needed to rest a little. Suddenly, Luca Winterwald grabbed his aunt by the skirt and stopped her. The main character looked at her nephew with confusion and asked him what was the matter and why he was grabbing her dress. The boy didn't answer his aunt. He just pointed with one glance at the train conductor, who was acting very suspiciously near the dining table. The main character looked at what her nephew showed her and noticed that the train conductor was indeed behaving strangely and suspiciously. The girl agreed with Luca Winterwald. Maybe it's just some kind of illusion or paranoia that the main character has been having due to the many stressful situations she's been in lately. But this tram driver needs to be checked urgently. Judith Maibaum did not have to wait long to do this. The suspicious conductor smiled sweetly and took out a gun, which he had hidden in the table with food, which he had rolled into the compartment. It turned out that this hired killer had everything ready to commit his terrible deed, for which he had been paid a lot of money. The main character found it especially unpleasant that the mercenary was going to kill her nephew with an impudent smile on his face. Judith Maibaum immediately hugged the boy to protect him from danger. Her maternal instincts kicked in. The girl was very scared. But now everything is in the hands of inexorable fate. A moment later, which seemed like an eternity to the main character, a traitorous shot was fired by a hired killer. The situation became critical. The girl and her nephew cannot understand what is happening now, but Rudiger Winterwald was not taken aback. He also managed to notice the mercenary and his gun. In a split second, the young aristocrat pulled out his pistol and fired a whole revolver cylinder at the criminal. The young lord had always been considered an excellent marksman with a pistol, and this time his skills and reactions did not fail him. But the mercenary turned out to be very agile and managed to dodge the bullets. The main character and her nephew hid behind the sofa to protect themselves from a stray bullet that could instantly end the life of each of them. They are very scared and want it all to end quickly. Judith Maibaum knows that the young duke must shoot the hired killer with his pistol. That's what her favorite novel says. But the hired killer must be taken alive to find the person who ordered the crime and gather evidence against him. Otherwise, the hidden enemy of the young lord and his nephew will constantly make new attempts on their lives until he achieves what he wants. This must be stopped at the very beginning. The girl thought that Rudiger Winterwald should shoot his opponent in the leg to disable him and take him alive. She had to somehow convey this to the young lord. The main character and her nephew continue to hide behind the sofa. Suddenly, the boy peeked out from behind the sofa to assess the situation and calculate the distance that separates him from the hired killer. Luca Winterwald looked at his aunt carefully. His eyes were full of courage and determination. The boy told the girl to stay put and not to stick her head out. After that, the main character's nephew quickly ran towards the hired killer to neutralize him and protect his beloved aunt. The girl tries to stop the child, but it is useless. The mercenary notices Luca Winterwald approaching him. Everything is happening very quickly. The hired killer wants to shoot the boy with his gun, but he can't. The excitement is taking its toll. The criminal realized that his weapon had failed him because it jammed and could no longer fire. The hired killer decided to change his tactics and use a hidden dagger to take the boy's life. But Luca Winterwald also did not lose his head in a critical situation. The brave boy grabbed a kitchen knife that was lying on the dining table and decided to use it as a cold weapon against his opponent. The hired killer hides a sharp dagger behind his back, which he intends to use right now to complete the unsuccessfully started task. At this time, Rudiger Winterwald reloaded his revolver and again aimed at the criminal, who was now busy fighting with knives with the main character's nephew. The assassin called the boy offensive names and raised his sharp blade above his head to deliver a fatal blow to the child. The decisive moment had arrived, on which the further course of this story would depend. It turned out that Luca Winterwald had excellent reflexes, which he inherited from his noble father. The boy reacted instantly and parried the assassin's powerful blow with his improvised blade, but it took too much strength from the child. He parried the blow and fell to the floor, dropping the kitchen knife. Luca Winterwald lies on the floor and cannot move. The last of his strength has left him. The main character can't sit in the shelter and just watch this horrible sight. The girl jumped up and ran to her little nephew, who was lying motionless. Luca Winterwald is holding up well, but he hit the floor hard. The boy is groaning in pain and cannot recover. He needs urgent help. Judith Maibaum placed her nephew's head on her lap and hugged him. She asked the boy if he was alive. Meanwhile, the assassin, who was standing next to the girl and the child, prepared to deal them the fatal blow. The main character noticed this and covered herself with her hand to somehow protect herself from the sharp blade of the hired killer, who would now pierce the girl's body and take her life. But now Rudiger Winterwald entered the game again. The young duke took good aim this time and fired the decisive shot from his revolver. The bullet hit the criminal in the shoulder just as he wanted to deliver the fatal blow to the main character. At the last moment, the assassin managed to strike with his sharp blade, but he missed and only slightly wounded Judith Maibaum's hand. The girl noticed this and was glad that she remained alive and did not lose a limb. The young lord is in control of the situation and keeps his enemy in the sights of his revolver. One extra move on the part of the hired killer and he will find himself in the land of eternal hunting in the company of his ancestors. The main character examines her wounded hand. Her nephew, who has come to his senses a little and can already move and talk, helps her with this. The girl looked at her brave nephew, who had just risked his life for her, and said that it was too reckless of him. But deep down, Judith Maibaum is proud of this beautiful boy. Luca Winterwald is very worried about the health of his beloved aunt. He said that he could not sit in hiding if Judith Maibaum was in danger. The boy did as the noble heart of a true aristocrat told him. The main character looked at her brave nephew and told him that he had done a very courageous thing. But in the future, he needed to be more careful and cautious. This would save his life in many dangerous situations. Judith Maibaum and her nephew are having a nice conversation and showing concern for each other. Meanwhile, Rudiger Winterwald is watching his charges and trying to figure out if everything is okay with them after the hitman's attack. At the moment when the young duke was distracted to watch his relatives, the wounded criminal disappeared from his field of vision. This was a mistake on the part of Rudiger Winterwald because the mercenary did not lose his composure and quickly ran out of the compartment. The wounded mercenary runs through the carriage, pushing aside other passengers who are outraged by such tactlessness, but do nothing to stop and neutralize him. Rudiger Winterwald decided to correct the mistake he had just made by losing sight of the assassin. He quickly ran after the criminal to catch him or destroy him. Meanwhile, the main character shouted after the young lord that he should under no circumstances kill the mercenary, because it was necessary to find out the name of the person who ordered the crime. Rudiger Winterwald is now very excited. Adrenaline is pumping through his entire being. The primal instinct of a hunter has kicked in. He heard the girl's words but scolded her for coming out of hiding. Judith Maibaum said that it was not important now. It was urgent to catch the fleeing assassin in order to find out the name of the real culprit of these terrible events. It is not for nothing that the young duke is considered one of the best marksmen in the kingdom. He shot the criminal without even looking at him and hit him right in the left leg. This will help to completely immobilize the mercenary. The main character noticed that Rudiger Winterwald fired without even looking at his opponent and neutralized him with one shot. But after a few seconds, the wounded mercenary gathered his last strength and rose to his feet to continue his escape. He had almost reached the door of the train car. If he went further, he could escape and avoid arrest. The main character watches everything that is happening now. She understands that something urgently needs to be done. Otherwise, the hired killer will be able to escape, and then no one will know the name of the person who ordered the crime. The brave girl decided to act immediately. She took a heavy pepper shaker from the dining table. The main character immediately came up with a plan to stop the fleeing mercenary. Judith Maybaum swung her weapon well and threw the heavy pepper shaker with all her might at the assassin, who had almost managed to leave the carriage thanks to the exertion of all his strength. The girl's throw was very successful. She hit the enemy's head with a heavy pepper shaker. The mercenary did not expect such a turn of events and began to stagger after that, barely standing on his feet. The girl was very pleased with her accurate throw. She praised herself and remembered how in real life she played softball in school, not missing a single practice. But something unexpected happened. The mercenary, swaying from side to side, managed to reach the end of the carriage and went out the door. Another moment, and he would disappear from sight completely. The main character understands that everything is not going according to plan. The hired killer is currently escaping from the traveler's hands, which is unacceptable for them. A few seconds later, the wounded criminal slipped and fell out of the carriage, leaving the train once and for all. Now it will definitely be impossible to catch him. This is a rather unfortunate fact. Judith Maybaum ran out of the train to see where the escaped criminal was. But she realized that the hitman had somehow managed to leave the express train and was now very far away, if he had survived the fall. Rudiger Winterwald appeared on the platform of the carriage and approached the upset girl. He immediately assessed the situation and realized that the criminal had managed to avoid arrest and a fitting punishment for his terrible deeds. The main character looked closely at the young duke and asked him if he thought the hired killer had survived after falling off the train at high speed. The noble aristocrat is an experienced warrior who has been in various combat situations and seen something similar. He, without thinking for a minute, answered the girl that most likely the bandit died. The express train continues its journey to the Winterwald family's estate. The main character and the young lord stand on the final platform of the carriage and try to comprehend everything that has just happened to them. A few minutes later, the young duke bandaged the wound on the girl's arm and placed her on the sofa to rest. Judith Maybaum burst into tears from the nervous tension she had experienced and said that she had killed a man today and could not believe it. According to the plot of the girl's favorite novel, this villain was supposed to die anyway. But this time, Judith Maybaum had a hand in the death of this criminal. This upset her very much. Luca Winterwald looks closely at his crying aunt and the wound that remained on her hand from today's incident. The boy thought for a moment and said that Judith Maybaum should return to the city of Emden. It would be safer for her that way. The main character listened to her nephew and looked at him in surprise. She could not understand why the boy wanted her to leave him and go back home. Luca Winterwald hastened to reassure his beloved aunt and said that he did not want to get rid of her. But the boy realized today that Judith Maybaum was in great danger next to him. Rudiger Winterwald heard what his nephew said. He knows deep down that the boy speaks quite sensibly. Perhaps the heroine needs to go home. The girl looked closely at her nephew and said that she could not leave him unattended if he was in danger from all sides. The boy answered his beloved aunt that these were his problems, and he did not want the person dear to him to suffer because of them. This surprised the girl very much and even scared her a little. Luca Winterwald continues his speech with a businesslike air. He told the main character that he had changed his mind and no longer wanted her to go with him to the Winterwald family estate. Judith Maybaum smiled slyly and said that she had also changed her mind and would now happily go to any place where her beloved nephew would be. Now the boy would not be able to get rid of his aunt so easily. Luca Winterwald did not expect such a turn of events. He was very surprised when he heard his aunt say that she would now gladly follow him to Winterwald Castle. The main character did not lose her composure and said that she enjoyed traveling on a luxurious high-speed train in a new chic dress in the company of nobles. She does not know when she will have such a great opportunity to enjoy all the delights of this life again. The boy listened carefully to his aunt and began to get angry with her after these words. He said that the girl had just been wounded and was in mortal danger, but she only thought about luxury and dresses. It was just awful. The main character does not hesitate to answer, and told her nephew that he too had just been in mortal danger, but for some reason decided to bravely attack the hired killer in order to protect his loved ones. Luca Winterwald stopped and fell silent. He had not expected such a treacherous answer from his aunt, and now he does not know what to say to her. Rudiger Winterwald decided to support the main character. He looked closely at his brave nephew and said that he had acted recklessly and imprudently today. This time he was lucky, but next time everything could be different. The adults decided to give their nephew a little teaching moment. They told the boy that he should behave more prudently in the future. Otherwise, all this could end fatally. Judith Maybaum continued her educational admonitions. The girl sternly said that the hired killer might have had a gun in his hands instead of a blade. In that case, the boy would already be dead. Luca Winterwald covered his ears with his hands because his older relatives had been educating him for an entire hour. The boy could not stand such a powerful educational suggestion and said that he understood everything and would not act thoughtlessly anymore. After this, the young man said in his defense that he was very worried about his aunt, who might do something strange to save the boy and suffer because of it. The brave boy calmed down and added that he had taken his beloved aunt with him to make her life more comfortable, not to expose her to any danger. Therefore, she must return home immediately. The main character looked sternly at her nephew. She realized that the boy would not change his mind. So, she had to come up with a way to convince him that Judith Maybaum would no longer be in danger. But the girl doesn't know if this is true. Today, she is very scared not only for her nephew, but also for herself. Her life was hanging by a thread a few hours ago. The main character thought that the threads of fate are always cunningly intertwined and tangled. And everything always goes wrong. This is how not only this fantasy world is arranged, but also the real universe from which the girl came. Judith Maybaum had the opportunity to abandon her nephew at the very beginning of her journey, as soon as she arrived here. But she did not do it. So she cast her lot and made her final choice. The girl decided to stay with the boy to change not only his fate, but her own as well. It was a difficult choice, but it had already been made, and the main character could not deviate from this path. Judith Maybaum still cannot answer the question of how she would have been able to live on if she had left such a wonderful baby to the mercy of a merciless fate. Besides, Luca Winterwald always brightened up the main character's loneliness when he was next to her. And this warmed the girl's tired soul. The main character ponders the current situation. She understands that now she has the last chance to avoid the consequences of her choice and return home. Out of excitement, the girl grabbed her skirt and squeezed her fingers tightly. Judith Maybaum sits on the sofa and thinks hard. Rudiger and Luca Winterwald look closely at the main character and tensely await her decision. As the girl says, so it will be. The main character thought about her future and made a fateful decision. She looked at her little nephew and said that he was right about everything. The boy asked if his aunt would return home to the city of Emden, but Judith Maybaum decided otherwise. She rejected her nephew's offer and said that she would stay by his side forever. This is her final decision. After that, the girl added that she would go to the Winterwald family estate as the boy's mother. This greatly surprised and puzzled the main character's nephew. Judith Maybaum was quick to explain her position. She had learned a lot during this trip, and she had time to weigh everything carefully and make a decision about her future life. The main character became very accustomed to her little nephew, and felt for herself what the sweet but very heavy shackles of attachment to a loved one are. The girl understands that in Winterwald Castle she is in mortal danger and she will most likely not be able to change it. But Judith Maybaum is not one of those people who give up at the first difficulties. She decided to try to change her fate. Now the main character wants to save not only herself and her nephew, but also Rudiger Winterwald, who, according to the plot of the novel, must die defending his nephew. The girl looked at her companions carefully and said that she had become too attached to them. Therefore, she could not leave them at such a crucial moment. Luca Winterwald listened to his aunt and could not believe his ears. The boy was very surprised that Judith Maybaum had decided to stay with him and the young duke, despite the dangers. The girl told her nephew that she had another reason to stay with Nick. If she was present at Winterwald Castle, she would have enough power and resources to confront the boy's enemies. But after that, the main character added that she would like to have more power when she gets to the family estate. It will be easier to defend her interests. Luca Winterwald thought for a moment and said that all this only proved the danger of staying in his family's ancestral castle. Perhaps the girl should think about this issue some more. The boy turned to Rudiger Winterwald and said that he must immediately express his opinion on the current situation. The heroine smiled at her nephew and said that he should call the young lord his uncle. Then he would respond even more willingly. Rudiger Winterwald thought for a moment and said that Judith Maybaum had come up with a pretty good plan. It could work if they thought through all the details and were determined to carry it out. Luca Winterwald listened to his uncle and cannot believe that he supported Judith Maybaum's decision, despite the danger that threatens her at the Winterwald estate. The main character said that upon arrival at the castle, she would tell everyone that her name was Larissa Maybaum and that she was the biological mother of the only heir of the Winterwald family. This simple plan should work. Rudiger Winterwald looks at his interlocutor carefully and is a little worried. The young aristocrat thinks that there is one small flaw in the girl's plan. He does not really like the fact that everyone will consider the main character to be his older brother's wife. The young duke turned to his nephew and said that from now on they must protect Judith Maybaum together, no matter what happened during her stay at Winterwald Castle. And anything could happen there. After that, the main character told her nephew that he should practice and call him Mom right now. This will help in the future to hide the truth about who Judith Maybaum really is. Luca Winterwald had not expected this turn of events. It was very unusual for him to call Judith Maybaum his mother. She had once called her that before leaving for the family castle, but that had only happened because of excessive emotion. The main character tries to force the boy to call him his mother, but he resists and says that he will not do it under duress. Perhaps the girl should not put so much pressure on her nephew. Otherwise, it may end in a quarrel. Judith Maybaum decided to change her tactics and began to persuade the child more gently. The girl said that there would be many dangers in Winterwald Castle, so now she needed to practice a little, so that in the future she would not slip up at the most inopportune moment. Luca Winterwald replied that he would not make a mistake and would handle everything perfectly. There was no need to put pressure on him now, because he did not want to deceive himself. This was very important for the boy, but the main character is not going to back down. The girl turned to the boy and asked him why now, when it is necessary, it is so difficult for him to call her his mother. Maybe Luca Winterwald will explain what the real reason is. Suddenly, Judith Maybaum felt the environment change. The express train found itself in a new area of the kingdom, one she had never been to before. The girl turned around and decided to look out the window to enjoy the new beautiful views and satisfy her curiosity. The main character looked out the window of her compartment and a wonderful picture opened up before her. There was a heavy, fluffy snow falling outside, which covered the entire area up to the mountains that majestically towered on the horizon. Judith Maybaum continues to look out the window and enjoy the beautiful view. The girl turns to her nephew and says that it has started snowing and he should see this wonderful sight. But Luca Winterwald sits quietly in his chair and shows no enthusiasm. The boy replied to his beloved aunt that he had long ago noticed that they had entered the snowy region of the kingdom. The main character said that in her hometown Emden, even in winter, it is rare for there to be snow. But here, even in spring, there is a lot of snow everywhere. After that, the girl looked at her nephew and asked him if he had seen such a large amount of snow before. Luca Winterwald answered the main character that he had never seen such a picture before, but he was not particularly interested in it. In Judith Maybaum's favorite novel, it was written that the boy was very happy about the snow when he saw it in the window of his compartment. He even blushed with pleasure, but now he continues to sit quietly with folded arms in his chair and pays no attention to the beautiful snowy landscape that stretches outside the carriage window. The main character looked closely at her nephew and thought that he was behaving very reservedly because he wanted to seem more mature than he actually was. That's why the boy was embarrassed in front of his aunt. Judith Maybaum decided to stroke the child's head to play with him a little. But the train suddenly stopped, and Rudiger Winterwald said that the travelers had arrived at their destination. A few minutes later, the main character changed into a warm coat and went out to a beautiful and clean station. The girl looked around and liked what she saw. But Judith Maybaum also realized that she would need some time to get used to the new climate. Suddenly, a strong and cold wind blew. The main character wrapped herself more tightly in her coat and felt that she really wanted to sneeze, which she did, thinking that the local wind did not like her. Judith Maybaum stands on the threshold of a new life. The girl looks at the falling snowflakes and wonders whether she will be able to survive in such harsh conditions. Suddenly, the main character heard Rudiger Winterwald calling her. The young aristocrat said that it was time for them to continue their journey in order to reach the family estate as soon as possible. Judith Maybaum approached the nobleman and asked him how they would get to Winterwald Castle if they had so many things they had brought with them. Then the girl pointed with her eyes at the railway workers who were unloading the luggage compartment of the carriage. Rudiger Winterwald replied to his interlocutor that he had prudently sent a telegram home just before leaving. Therefore, the family carriage would soon arrive at the station. This should happen any minute. The main character was a little surprised when she heard these words of the young aristocrat. Until that moment, the girl thought that in this fantasy world there was no way to send a telegram. A few minutes later, the travelers approached the exit of the station and noticed that the Winterwald family carriage had already arrived at its destination and was waiting for its passengers. The alert and cheerful coachman waved his hand to Rüdiger Winterwald and greeted him loudly. He seemed very happy to see his young master. The coachman continued to wave his arms vigorously and call loudly to the travelers. He said that the carriage was in perfect working order and was ready to take the young gentleman and his companions to Winterwald Castle in complete comfort. The driver smiled kindly at Rüdiger Winterwald as he came closer. He said that the old Duke and Duchess were expecting the return of their son and nephew and were burning with impatience to see the heir of their family. After this, the joyful coachman turned his attention to Luca Winterwald and sighed loudly in surprise. Without thinking for a moment, he said that this boy was very similar to his father in his youth. Luca Winterwald looks closely at his new acquaintance and tries to understand why he is behaving so cheerfully and cheekily. Maybe everyone in Winterwald Castle behaves like that. But the driver turned out to be quite a pleasant and open person, who quickly introduced himself to the boy and said that his name was Hans, and that he worked as a groom at Winterwald Castle. Someday the heir would have a beautiful horse, and Hans would look after it so that the young man could enjoy riding it. Luca Winterwald reluctantly said that it was nice to meet Hans. Meanwhile, the main character looks closely at the groom and thinks that he is a very good-natured person, whom she does not remember in the novel. The driver also did not waste time and asked his master, looking at the main character, who was this beautiful lady who came with him. This question puzzled the young lord a little. The girl thought that the first impression was always very important and prepared to introduce herself to the groom Hans. She had to make him believe in her deception. After that, the main character smiled affably at the coachman and said that she was very pleased to meet him. The girl also gave her name and said that she was the mother of Luca Winterwald. Once the acquaintance took place, the travelers got into a carriage, which took them to Winterwald Castle in a matter of minutes. This estate immediately struck the main character and her nephew with its grandeur, luxury, and beauty. Judith Maibaum and her companions entered the gates that lead to the family castle of Winterwald. Meanwhile, the girl thinks that she has arrived on the battlefield described in her favorite novel. The outcome of this battle will determine whether this story will become a description not of revenge, but of becoming. The travelers came close to the entrance to Winterwald Castle. The efficient butlers greeted the young gentleman and his companions and expressed the hope that they had arrived safely. Young Lord Rüdiger Winterwald is now silent and focused on his thoughts. He understands that an important moment in his life has arrived, on which not only his fate but also the future of his loved ones will depend. The main character looks at her companion attentively. She noticed that the young Duke is now very thoughtful and silent. Therefore, the girl does not want to disturb him. Rüdiger Winterwald is experiencing strange feelings right now. He is not particularly attached to his family and prefers military action to family life. But this young nobleman also feels a sense of aristocratic duty to his relatives. Suddenly, the young Duke noticed that the main character was looking at him intently and did not take her eyes off him. Rüdiger Winterwald asked the girl if there was anything extra on his face. Judith Maibaum was surprised by the aristocrat's question and said that there was nothing superfluous on his face. But she looked at him because she could not stop admiring his beauty. Rüdiger Winterwald had not expected such a turn of events. He was simply dumbfounded when he heard his interlocutor's answer. Had the girl really just honestly admired his beauty? And did so without any embarrassment in front of the young lord. Judith Maibaum noticed the young Duke's embarrassment and smiled coquettishly at him. After a pause, the main character said that she was just joking to cheer up the gloomy and thoughtful nobleman a little. Finally, the travelers entered the Winterwald family castle. Now they must meet its owners and talk to them, observing all the rules of aristocratic etiquette. When the travelers entered the palace, they immediately met the mother of the young Duke, whose name is Sophia Winterwald. She is the ruling Duchess of this beautiful castle, and has a truly noble character with features of coldness and prudence. The main character immediately bowed to the ruling Duchess as soon as she noticed her. The girl's face showed some tension and excitement because she immediately realized that there was a very powerful woman in front of her. Judith Maibaum looks closely at Sophie Winterwald. The girl remembered that the Duchess was once a lady-in-waiting to Princess Vanessa. She is Jonas Winterwald's stepmother and Rüdiger's biological mother. When Princess Vanessa died suddenly from an infectious disease, Duke Maximilian Winterwald needed a new wife and mistress of his vast estate. The aristocrat's choice fell on Countess Sophia, whom he loved with all his heart. The sudden death of the Duke's first wife and the very rapid rise of his second wife gave rise to well-founded suspicions among some of the nobles that Princess Vanessa had been poisoned as a result of a treacherous and insidious plot. The main character remembered all this important information that she learned from her favorite novel, which is called The Master of the Winter Forest. But the girl also remembered that the version about the poisoning of Princess Vanessa was not confirmed. The ruling Duchess looked appraisingly at her son and the guests, but did not greet them or express any particular joy. This woman was accustomed to holding back her emotions. After this, Duchess Sophia told the travelers to change their clothes and proceed to the dinner table. Judith Maibaum maintains her presence of mind and good humor despite the rather cold reception at Winterwald Castle. She understands that she is about to undergo a thorough interrogation at lunch. The main character remembered important information that Duchess Sophia always adhered to aristocratic values. Also, for some reason, she loved her stepson more than her own son. The second wife of the eldest Duke of Winterwald personally raised his first son, Jonas, but at the age of 2, she gave her own son to a professional nanny to be raised. Judith Maibaum is distracted from her memories and panics for a brief moment. The girl understands that she is in mortal danger in this estate, so she decides to pray that her fate will work out and that everything will be okay with her. A few minutes later, the festive dinner began. All members of the Winterwald family gathered at the dinner table. Maximilian Winterwald is the reigning duke and the rightful owner of his vast and rich estate. This powerful and famous nobleman dines calmly and shows no signs of agitation. The main character also eats calmly. She is well-mannered enough to know how to use various cutlery correctly. Sophia Winterwald drew attention to this. The reigning Duchess smiled at Judith Maibaum, who was standing opposite her, and complimented her, saying that she was a wonderful girl because she had brought up a child alone. It was a very difficult task. The Duchess asked the main character to tell a little about herself and her family. The girl answered that her parents passed away early and she barely remembers them. So Judith Maibaum knows what it is like to grow up without parents. After that, the girl pointed at her nephew and said that he only has her and no one else. They have a small family, but a friendly one. They also try to support each other in everything. These words melted the heart of the ruling Duchess and caused her to feel a surge of pity and sympathy for Judith Maibaum and her unfortunate nephew. Sophia Winterwald believes that not every woman can raise a child alone. The Duchess asked the main character how she had managed to cope with all the difficulties she had encountered while in such a difficult situation. The girl smiled at her interlocutor and thought that she should not admit that she had only been in this world for about 2 months. Rudiger Winterwald listens a little attentively to his mother's conversation with the main character. He is sweating a little from excitement and does not understand why Duchess Sophie is so talkative now. Something is wrong here. The festive dinner continues. Everyone present calmly enjoys the delicious food and continues to chat to get to know each other better. Sophia Winterwald drank some wine and said that she felt an incredible relief that, thanks to the main character, the line of Princess Vanessa continues. It is truly a miracle. The Duchess also asked the girl if she had aristocratic blood in her veins. Judith Maibaum was a little embarrassed and replied that her family had been noble only up until her father. Sophia Winterwald listened attentively to her interlocutor, smiled sweetly, and said that the main character had very beautiful light purple eyes. They aroused admiration and envy in the Duchess. Judith Maibaum did not expect such an exquisite compliment from the mistress of this house. The girl also learned from her that such an eye color is very rare and this makes it especially valuable. It was at this moment that Sophia Winterwald's cunning showed itself. She looked intently into the eyes of the main character and said that it would be wonderful if her child inherited the color of her eyes, thus hinting that she guessed that Luca Winterwald was not her biological son. Judith Maibaum choked on her food when she heard the Duchess's words. Rudiger Winterwald became wary and realized that his mother had just dealt a psychological blow to the main character. The girl's mind flashed with the thought that Luca Winterwald looked very much like his half-father. But in the current situation, it would be preferable if the boy also looked like Judith Maibaum. The main character understands that something has not gone according to her plan. It turns out that Sophia Winterwald is not as easy to deceive as it might seem at first glance. The aristocratic upbringing of the ruling Duchess makes itself felt. After this, Judith Maibaum turned her attention to Maximilian Winterwald, who had not said a single word since the beginning of the festive meal. This aristocrat looks very serious and thoughtful. The main character thought for a moment that the appearance of a new relative in his family castle did not really interest the old duke, who was constantly silent and thinking hard about something. Judith Maybaum knows that Maximilian Winterwald has always been a very cold and reserved nobleman, far from being a family man. He has always devoted his attention only to his beloved wife, Sophie Winterwald. It was as if she had bewitched him. The main character looked with pity and sympathy at her nephew, who was really expecting to be warmly welcomed into his family. The boy was afraid to admit it even to himself, but it was true. And Judith Maybaum knows about it. Sophia Winterwald turned to her little grandson and asked him if he liked the food that was currently on the table. She doesn't know what young people like these days, but the chef at Winterwald Castle did a great job. The boy listened attentively to his grandmother and does not know how to answer her correctly, to tell the truth and not disappoint her. The main character watches her nephew, realizing that he can simply ignore the Duchess. But this is unacceptable. After some confusion, Luca Winterwald finally gave his answer and said that it was the first time in his life that he had eaten something so delicious. The main character was glad that the boy did not ignore his grandmother's question. Sophia Winterwald looked closely at her grandson and said that she was very glad that he enjoyed the festive dinner. The boy was quick to consolidate his success and added that he liked the chocolate cake with berry jam the most. The ruling Duchess was delighted that her grandson turned out to be quite a sociable boy, and said that she would order the cook to prepare this dessert for tomorrow's dinner. Suddenly, something strange happened. Sophia Winterwald asked the child if he had asked his aunt to make such a cake for his birthday. The main character was not taken aback when the ruling Duchess called her Luca Winterwald's aunt. She pretended not to hear and asked Lady Sophia what she said. The ruling Duchess immediately fell silent and covered her mouth with her hand, indicating that she had accidentally misspoke. But Judith Maybaum realized that Lady Sophia already knew the truth and did not consider her to be Luca Winterwald's real mother. The main character also noticed that the hands of the ruling Duchess were shaking nervously. It is not very noticeable, but if you look closely, you can see it. The girl is very puzzled by what she is currently observing. She cannot understand why all these psychological games are necessary if you can simply tell everything to your interlocutor's face. To ease the tension, Rüdiger Winterwald said he planned to stay at his family estate for a while and not return to military service for now. He had accumulated a lot of vacation days that he needed to use this year. The young Duke's mother listened to him and said that in that case he could accompany Lady Judith and her son to the capital so that they could have a useful and educational tour and meet the royal family. The main character did not expect such a turn of events. Lady Sophia thought for a moment and quickly explained the reason for the trip to the capital of the kingdom. Luca Winterwald is a descendant of the royal family, so he must be introduced to the court. Judith Maybaum listens attentively to the ruling Duchess and wonders why she wants to send the heir of the Winterwald family to the capital so soon. It's all very suspicious. Lady Sophia looked at the main character appraisingly and said that for the upcoming trip to the capital of the kingdom and for the visit to the royal palace, she would need a suitable outfit. The girl replied that she already had enough dresses, but the Duchess looked at her son with disapproval and said that she could not believe that he had left Judith Maybaum without her precious jewels. Rüdiger Winterwald does not know what to say to his mother about this remark. Lady Sophia continues to drink her wine calmly from her glass and admonish her son. The Duchess said that he had acted foolishly, leaving such a beautiful girl as Lady Judith without diamonds, rubies, and pearls. The main character was a little confused by such a generous offer and said that she did not need jewelry. The girl was satisfied with the chic outfits that Rüdiger Winterwald bought for her. The ruling Duchess smiled sweetly at the girl and said that she would help her choose suitable jewelry. Judith Maybaum was delighted by Lady Sophia's words. She had refused jewelry out of politeness, but everyone knows that diamonds are a girl's best friend. After the festive dinner was over, the main character and her companions decided to go on a short excursion around Winterwald Castle. The main character follows a young nobleman who volunteered to show the local beauties. The girl thinks that the young duke is very similar to his mother, who also has a rather domineering character and likes to go ahead. The main character walks along the spacious corridor of Winterwald Castle and looks at the wonderful paintings that hang on the walls. Suddenly, the girl notices a portrait of the beautiful Princess Vanessa. The girl turned to Rüdiger Winterwald and asked who was depicted in this remarkable painting. The young duke replied that they were looking at a portrait of his brother Jonas's mother. The main character decided to stop near this portrait and examine it more closely. Judith Maybaum cannot stop admiring the beauty of Princess Vanessa, who looks at her as if she were alive. The girl froze in place and held her breath, admiring the beautiful work of the famous artist. Lady Judith also noticed that Luca Winterwald looked very much like his own mother. The main character looks closely at the face of Princess Vanessa. She noticed the eyes of the king's eldest daughter. It turns out that they are also light purple, like Judith Maybaum. For a split second, this coincidence seemed not accidental to the main character. But she did not attach much importance to it and thought about Maximilian Winterwald's second wife. Judith Maybaum realized the fact that Sophia Winterwald did not give her preference to Jonas or Luca Winterwald, but to the family tree of Princess Vanessa. The main character cannot understand why the ruling Duchess acts this way, but she is sure that there are good reasons for this. When the girl finished looking at the portrait of Princess Vanessa, she continued her way along the spacious corridor of Winterwald Castle. But for some reason, the main character felt very sad in her soul. After a while, the short tour of the Winterwald family's ancestral estate was over. Afterwards, the young duke told his nephew to follow the servant who would show the boy his room. The maids prepared other rooms for Judith Maybaum. Rüdiger Winterwald kindly showed the girl a room where she could rest and change her clothes. The main character thought that now she could relax and be alone after a long and hard day. But the young duke ordered the maid to bring tea to the girl's room and invited her to join him. Rüdiger Winterwald said that he wanted to discuss with the main character the precious jewelry that his mother mentioned today during the festive dinner. The young duke said that he wanted to buy the girl many rings that she could wear on all her fingers. The main character heard this and was so surprised that she almost choked on her tea. Judith Maybaum laughed and said that she had once told her interlocutor about this, but it was just an innocent joke on her part. Rüdiger Winterwald said that he would be able to provide his interlocutor with precious jewelry for every day, and Lady Sophia would give her a very valuable gift for special occasions. The heroine tried to protest against such reckless extravagance, but the young lord stopped her with a confident gesture of his strong hand and said that he insisted on his proposal. But Judith Maybaum was not used to being told what to do. The girl said that one set of jewelry, which the Duchess would give her, would be enough for her. Rüdiger Winterwald does not listen to the main character and does not accept her objections. He said that she would need at least 1,000 sets of jewelry for a comfortable social life. The girl couldn't believe her ears when she heard the number her interlocutor had named. Could it be that Rüdiger Winterwald would give her 1,000 sets of real jewelry? The young duke added that all these precious stones and gold could be considered as an emergency reserve for a rainy day. Anything can happen in life. The girl listens attentively to her interlocutor and cannot understand how one can sell one's gifts. It would be simply unethical. In turn, Rüdiger Winterwald does not understand why the main character reacts so violently and emotionally to the ordinary offer of the young duke, who simply wants to do the girl an ordinary favor. Judith Maybaum thought a little about her interlocutor's proposal and said that she did not need any extra things, and she was not going to sell the gifts. Therefore, let the young lord keep the jewelry to himself. The young lord thought about the heroine's words and said that he was pleased by the potential that Judith Maybaum would not sell his gifts and would keep them no matter what happened. The main character looks at the young duke with surprise and incomprehension. It seems to the girl that the aristocrat simply does not hear her and thinks only about his own. Rüdiger Winterwald told his interlocutor that he did not attach any value to any material things. He valued only spiritual or meaningful things. The young duke remembered his army comrades who were constantly racking their brains over what they should give their girlfriends. The nobleman added that he was overjoyed when he heard that Judith Maybaum would treasure the precious things he would give her. Now he understood what it felt like for a man to court a girl. The main character was confused when she heard these words of the young duke. The girl cannot understand why Rüdiger Winterwald says such intimate things in the presence of the maids. Judith Maybaum covered her face with her hand, showing her interlocutor that she was very embarrassed. After that, the girl told the young duke that he had blurted out something absurd again. The main character added that Rüdiger Winterwald had already tired her out with his persuasion. The girl would be satisfied with one set of jewelry that the ruling Duchess would give her. The young duke is puzzled and silent. He is used to having all his wishes fulfilled immediately, and no one dares to contradict him. But this time, everything happened differently than usual. Rüdiger Winterwald thought for a moment and said that the heroine should accept at least 2 sets of jewelry. The girl did not expect that the young nobleman would continue to insist on his own. Lord Winterwald has already started asking the main character to accept the jewels from him. This is very important to him. Judith Maybaum looks at her interlocutor attentively and thinks that he is a very stubborn person. Apparently, the young duke took after his mother and is used to always getting his way by any means available to him. The girl thought for a moment and said that she would give in to Rüdiger Winterwald's persuasion. He could give her a couple of sets of precious jewelry. The young nobleman couldn't believe his ears when he heard the heroine's answer. Finally, he managed to persuade the girl to accept his precious gift. This is another progress in their relationship. Rüdiger Winterwald is completely satisfied that he was able to achieve his goal. He got up from his chair and headed towards the exit of the main character's room, saying that he would immediately select the best jewelry for the girl. After that, the nobleman wished Judith Maybaum a pleasant rest and left her room. The main character was glad that now she could finally be alone after a hard day and relax a little. The girl walked over to her bed and fell face down on the pillow, exhausted. She thought that there was something wrong with Rüdiger Winterwald if he was so concerned about giving the main character precious jewelry. After this, Judith Maybaum changed into her nightgown and fell asleep in her soft bed. That night, the girl had a nightmare about jewelry that she did not want to put on or wear. A beautiful frosty and sunny morning has arrived in the Duchy of Winterwald. The daylight has already appeared from behind the majestic mountains that rise on the horizon. Judith Maybaum had a bad night's sleep because of a nightmare she had. The girl woke up and saw a man in her room who said he was a butler. The servant introduced himself to the main character and said that his name was Vincent, and that he would look after his charge, carrying out all her orders. After this, the efficient and helpful butler Vincent introduced the main character to several girls who are candidates for the position of the mistress's personal servant. Judith Maybaum got up from her bed, changed into a beautiful dress, and approached the girls Vincent had introduced to her. The main character liked all the maids. She doesn't know which one to choose for herself. Lady Judith carefully examined all the girls standing in front of her and chose a young maid with brown hair. The main character immediately liked this maid because she stands out among the other candidates with her appearance. The energetic maid was very happy that Judith Maybaum had chosen her. She bowed to her mistress and said that she would be happy to serve her faithfully and truly. It would be a great honor for the girl. After this, the girl said that her name was Laura and that she would be acting as Judith Maybaum's personal maid, who could completely count on her at any time of the day or night. The main character looks closely at her personal maid and thinks about how her life has changed so much in a short period of time. Judith Maybaum never had servants in her house. The girls study each other carefully. Lady Judith is impatient to give her personal maid her first instructions, and the maid is eager to get to work on her duties. A few seconds later, the main character said that she had a small request for her personal maid. Laura was glad that she could be useful and prepared to fulfill everything, but Judith Maybaum asked the maid to sit down next to her on the comfortable sofa. The main character wants Laura to share with her some useful information that may be useful to her when communicating with the inhabitants of this vast estate. The maid did not expect such a turn of events. She was a little confused and now does not know what to do in this situation. The girl is afraid of not knowing something or saying something for which she can pay with her job, health, or even her life. Laura thought for a moment and said that she begged her pardon. She knew almost nothing, because she was new to Winterwald Castle. But if the maid could be of any use, she would be happy to do so. The girls settled down comfortably for the upcoming conversation. Laura asked not to be offended if she could not answer some of the main character's questions. Lady Judith said that it was not a big deal. Afterwards, Judith Maybaum asked her personal maid if the maids who work at the estate were afraid of Rüdiger Winterwald. Sometimes he seemed so gloomy, domineering, and strict. This question puzzled Laura. She did not know what to answer her mistress. Lady Judith added that she had been somewhat disconcerted by the maid's behavior during their conversation with the young duke yesterday. The maids had no problem eavesdropping and spreading idle gossip. This was unacceptable and should be nipped in the bud. The main character also noticed that the maids were always very nervous when they served him tea or served him in other ways. Perhaps Rüdiger Winterwald was too strict with them. Laura listened attentively to her mistress and was a little embarrassed before giving her answer. She said that she did not know how to tell Lady Judith, but the young duke had a peculiar character. She then added that Rüdiger Winterwald is the kind of person she would like to see and interact with as little as possible. He is very strict and demanding with the people around him. The main character looked closely at her personal maid and asked her if everything was really that bad, and nothing could be done about it. The maid hastened to reassure her new mistress and said that everything was not so bad and was somewhat different from what Laura had told her. In fact, Rüdiger Winterwald was a wonderful and fair nobleman who never offended weak people. The young maid remembered Jonas Winterwald, who had a gorgeous appearance, was a favorite of the ladies of the court, and was also fabulously rich and never saved his money, living in luxury. Also, royal blood flowed in his veins. In turn, Rüdiger Winterwald also has a beautiful appearance, But this aristocrat is a bit rude and withdrawn. He also has the traits of a true warrior who will go to the very end for the sake of his family and those close to him. Judith Maibaum listens attentively to her personal maid and thinks about Rüdiger Winterwald. The girl completely agrees with the psychological portrait of the young duke that Laura described to her. The main character's maid continued her story. She told Lady Judith that many maids had previously tried to flirt with the young master in order to lure him into their nets and increase their social status. But all this was to no avail. Rüdiger Winterwald always refused such unclean girls and drove them out of the court. The young aristocrat never betrayed his pure and worthy ideals. But Jonas Winterwald always used his position in society and untold wealth to seduce as many young and beautiful girls as possible. Over the years, the maids have accumulated misunderstandings about the situation, and now all the maids who work in the estate are sure that Rüdiger Winterwald will fire them for the slightest mistake. But this is not so. Laura added that the situation was aggravated by the fact that the young duke rarely visited the family castle because he served in the royal army in a high position. In addition, Rüdiger Winterwald was always known for his strictness. The main character listened attentively to her interlocutor and sighed with relief. She thought that the young duke was an ordinary tyrant, so the maids were afraid of him. But it turned out that he was a worthy aristocrat who should be respected. After this, Judith Maibaum asked her personal maid how she knew all this. After all, Laura said that she was completely new here. This question did not embarrass the maid, and she quickly gave her answer. Laura smiled at her mistress and said that her secret was that her mother worked in the local kitchen, and the lady's personal maid Judith had helped her mother at work since early childhood. Therefore, she knows a lot of information about the inhabitants of Winterwald Castle. The maid looked at her mistress seriously and said that her young age would not be a hindrance in her service to Lady Judith. She would be able to perform her duties better than other girls. Laura is proud of her achievements and believes that she was chosen as a candidate for Judith Maibaum's personal maid because she is very efficient, sociable, and quick-witted. The main character smiled, looking at her funny maid, and said that she was sure that she had made the right choice. Laura's candidacy completely suited Lady Judith. The lady turned to her personal servant and said that she had high hopes for the future and hoped that dear Laura would not let her down at the critical moment. Laura laughed heartily and joyfully when she heard her young mistress's words. The maid said that Judith Maibaum could rely on her completely. She would not let her down. The girls continued their fascinating conversation for quite a long time. The main character has accumulated many questions that she wants to clarify thanks to her faithful maid. Life in the Winterwald estate goes on as usual. The main character's nephew gradually began to adapt to the internal routine of his family. The boy's education in art and science also began. All the teachers who taught Luca Winterwald noticed that the boy had excellent knowledge in all subjects. This is phenomenal. When Judith Maibaum learned of this, she thought he was a true genius who had absorbed his exceptional ability to learn with his mother's milk. But the main character began to be very interested in the question of why her nephew had not shown his talents before, and only after arriving at Winterwald Castle began to show his knowledge. The girl remembered that in the original novel, which is called The Master of the Winter Forest, her nephew initially had difficulties with school. The boy had a hard time absorbing the huge flow of new knowledge that fell upon him. Those around him, and even Rüdiger Winterwald, did not understand the difficulties that a little boy faced in the ducal palace, who was used to living on the streets and begging for food from the townspeople. Everyone told Luca Winterwald that he needed to try harder in his studies in the arts and sciences, but the child could not understand that adults wanted him. He was already doing the best he could at the moment. This had a negative impact on the child's psyche, who began to feel like a lonely outcast, who was misunderstood and abandoned to his fate. The boy needed love and affection, not constant moralizing from his elders. However, one day, Rüdiger Winterwald returned home from military service and noticed that his nephew was in big trouble. He decided to act immediately to sort out the situation. The young duke approached the crying boy and asked him if he had received any education before. Luca Winterwald answered his uncle in the negative. After this incident, Rüdiger understood everything and decided to change the child's education system. Meanwhile, Franz Birkenisch never missed an opportunity to publicly humiliate Luca Winterwald. This wily aristocrat showed everyone how stupid his little relative, who was to become the heir to Winterwald Castle, was. The boy's uncle always stood up for him and never let anyone hurt him. Franz Birkenisch once again tried to humiliate the child in front of idle onlookers. but he paid dearly for it thanks to Rüdiger Winterwald. The main character recalls these events, which were described in the original novel, and cannot understand why the book Luca Winterwald is so different from the current heir to the ducal title. All this seems very strange and suspicious to the girl. Judith Maibaum decided to visit her beloved nephew in the schoolroom. The boy was sitting quietly at the table, studying his next subject. The main character entered the room and told her nephew that she understood how much information was currently falling on him. The girl asked if the boy was having a hard time and if he was coping with the tasks set before him. Luca Winterwald listened attentively to his aunt and sighed heavily. After that, the boy sadly said that none of this mattered, because no one cared about it. Judith Maibaum looks at her nephew and thinks that he is coping with everything just fine. But over time, many suspicious inconsistencies have accumulated with the original novel about the revenge of the master of the Winter Forest. By and large, there is nothing left of Luca Winterwald from the original novel and the boy who is now in front of the main character, except for his identical appearance. Afterwards, Judith Maibaum settled down on the comfortable sofa to watch her nephew for a while longer, as he calmly continued reading his school textbook. Apparently, this task was not particularly difficult for the boy. The main character can't stop admiring the handsome and smart boy of royal blood, but the child is completely immersed in reading a book and doesn't pay any attention to his guest. Suddenly, a very strange and frightening thought occurred to Judith Maibaum. Maybe Luca Winterwald somehow miraculously understood that he was in a fantasy world. The main character thought about asking her 11-year-old nephew directly about this. But no one can guarantee that the boy will want to tell her the truth or will not consider her crazy. At that moment, the girl realized that she had been too hasty in her conclusions about her nephew. She remembered that the characters of Rüdiger and Sophia also differed from those described in the original novel. In addition, the main character understands that her character is radically different from the character of Judith Maibaum from the novel The Master of the Winter Forest. Something is wrong here, and this still needs to be sorted out. All these complicated and confusing thoughts almost made the girl's brain boil. She stopped herself and thought that she needed to follow an information diet. Otherwise, she could get sick and end up in bed. The main character thinks that there have been too many adventures in her life lately, which make her head spin. But don't get hung up on the little things. Judith Maibaum picked up her knitting. This activity relaxes her and allows her to escape from bad and disturbing thoughts. The girl thinks about the need to monitor the actions of Franz Birkenisch, who threatens the safety of her nephew. Luca Winterwald looked up from his studies and noticed his aunt doing needlework. This interested the boy, and he asked the girl what she was doing now. The main character was a little embarrassed and said that at the moment she was knitting to unwind a little and distract herself from her worries. Lady Judith is not going to hide this from the boy. She decided to be honest with her nephew in everything and share her feelings and thoughts with him. This will help the relatives become much closer. While Luca Winterwald is busy with his studies, the main character needs to occupy herself with something. The girl sometimes gets very bored, so she decided to do some handicrafts. This is a great way to train your attention and concentration. In the original novel, Judith Maibaum's main hobby was reading books. The girl devoured a huge number of various romantic stories, which perfectly brightened up her leisure time. But this time, the main character is not at all drawn to reading, so the girl decided to do more practical things. For example, Judith Maibaum really liked knitting, which she last did as a child. Luca Winterwald looks closely at his beloved aunt and can't believe that she has become so thrifty and assiduous that she has started doing needlework. She used to love loud parties with her friends from Emden. The boy also noticed that his aunt was good at knitting. Today, he discovered another unknown side of his relative, which he had not noticed at all before. Luca Winterwald said he was happy for his aunt. As long as she enjoyed knitting, it was definitely something to do. But the boy also added that the girl needed to practice a little more to become more dexterous. Sometimes the main character feels that her nephew does not respect her at all and treats her very superficially, especially when the boy withdraws into himself and does not want to talk to anyone. To improve her knitting skills, Lady Judith called her maid and asked her if she could knit well. The maid answered her mistress that she could do it very skillfully and efficiently. The main character asked Laura to share her handicraft secrets and teach her to knit even better than she does now. The maid happily agreed and began to teach her mistress. A few days later, Lady Judith managed to knit a beautiful scarf, which she now looks at with pleasure and admires the result of her work. The main character looked at herself and the scarf she knitted in the mirror. The girl realized that she had been afraid of her talents before, but now everything would be different. After that, she decided to give this scarf to her beloved nephew, so that he would be proud of her. Judith Maibaum thought that while she had inspiration, she would knit another warm scarf, which is perfect for the cold climate of the Winterwald estate. It would be very pleasant to walk with such a scarf around your neck. Suddenly, a maid entered the main character's room and reported to her mistress that the ruling Duchess, Lady Sophia Winterwald, was urgently looking for her. This slightly alarmed the girl, who could not understand why Rudiger Winterwald's mother needed her so urgently. The main character tries to make some intelligible assumptions about this, but she does not succeed. But everything became clear very quickly when Lady Judith came to the ruling Duchess. The noble aristocrat kept her promise and gave the girl a luxurious gift. The main character did not expect such a development of events. She holds a box with a luxurious set of jewelry in her hands and does not know what to answer her benefactress. Next to Lady Sophia stands the butler Vincent, who said that the diamonds mined in the mines that belong to the Winterwald family are always in great demand and popularity. This necklace is called the Tears of the Ice Fairy. The ruling Duchess, with an important and impressive look, told the girl that this was a very famous necklace in the kingdom, which was worth a lot of money. Judith Maibaum holds the box of diamonds, which are worth a fortune, in confusion and does not know what to do now. The girl understands only one thing at this moment, that this will be a huge burden for her. Sophia Winterwald snapped her fingers and ordered her maid Katie to help the main character try on the jewels she had just received as a gift from the ruling Duchess. The girl did not expect such a turn of events and said that these diamonds were too big and heavy for her, but the Duchess doesn't want to hear anything. She again ordered the maid to take the necklace and put it on Judith Maibaum's neck. The main character stopped resisting and tried on the luxurious jewel. Sophie Winterwald looks closely at Lady Judith and the necklace, which looks great on the main character. The ruling Duchess was pleased with the result of the fitting, but the girl's neck suddenly began to hurt from the weight of the large necklace. She leaned forward a little to relieve the strain and rest a little. The main character thinks that such a rare and expensive jewel will attract unnecessary attention to her person if she wears it. In addition, the girl noticed that her opinion is not listened to at all in this house. When the necklace fitting is over, Judith Maibaum goes to her room to think about the situation. She walks around the jewelry box in a panic, thinking about how she now has another extra burden on her. The main character thought that first of all, she should think about the safety of such a precious gift, which costs a lot of money. She needs to make sure that no one steals the necklace. Judith Maibaum decided to knit a warm scarf again to calm down a bit and collect her thoughts, which had started to make her head spin again. The girl thought about how difficult it is to be a rich person, because it is a big responsibility. A pleasant winter evening has arrived. All the inhabitants of Winterwald Castle are already resting and preparing for sleep. The night promises to be quiet and calm. Rudiger Winterwald returned to his native estate after a short absence. He was engaged in a very important matter, the results of which he hurries to inform the main character. The girl was delighted when the young duke entered her room. She greeted Rudiger Winterwald and asked him why he had come to her at such a late hour. The maid Laura immediately brought the young master a glass of fresh and cool water so that he could quench his thirst and come to his senses a little. Rudiger Winterwald thanked Laura for her service and drank a glass of water in one gulp. The main character looks closely at the young lord and admires his masculine beauty. After this, the Duke looked around and noticed a box with a precious necklace that the ruling Duchess had given to Judith Maibaum. Rudiger Winterwald asked the girl in surprise what was in the box. The main character also looked at the jewelry box and said that it contained a necklace called the Ice Fairy's Tears. It was a gift from Sophia Winterwald. The young Duke sighed in disappointment and told his interlocutor that he was currently one step behind his mother. The girl could not understand what the young man was talking about. Rudiger Winterwald decided to clarify the situation immediately and said that he wanted to be the first to present the main character with the precious gift for which he had left the estate today. After this, the young aristocrat took a small box from the inside pocket of his uniform and handed it to Judith Maibaum. The girl did not expect such a turn of events and was a little confused. She looks closely at the young duke and the box in his hands and doesn't know what to do now. There were too many expensive gifts for her today. She's not used to it. When the girl realized that Rudiger Winterwald had spent the whole day looking for a gift for her, she blushed deeply and became embarrassed. The main character really liked that the young aristocrat cared about her so much. After this, Judith Maibaum smiled at her admirer and thanked him for his attention and care for her. This is worthy of all praise and admiration. Rudiger Winterwald sighed again in disappointment and said that he was very sorry. After all, the first gift is always special and unique. But unfortunately, he was late with this. His mother beat him to it. The main character listened attentively to the young lord and blushed again. She said that all this was just convention, and it did not matter who gave the first gift and who the second in the current situation. The main thing was care and attention. Judith Maibaum added that it would have been different if the young man had given her an engagement ring. Then she would have reasoned differently. But Rüdiger Winterwald said that he had brought her something else. The main character once again turned her attention to the small box she holds in her hands. She is preparing to open this case and see what is inside. The girl is very interested in what kind of decoration the young duke has prepared for her. Maybe it will have some kind of hint or secret meaning. There's just one more moment left and the main character will finally satisfy her curiosity. All she needs to do is make a final movement with the thumbs of both hands, and everything will become clear. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. A whole squad of servants quickly entered the main character's room, holding boxes with various jewels in their hands. The girl could not believe her eyes and was very surprised by everything that was happening here. For a moment, Judith Maibaum thought she was sleeping, and that all of this was a nightmare. Could it really be that there were so many treasures around her that she could safely own? The main character came to her senses a little after the initial shock and asked the young aristocrat why he had given her so many sets of jewelry. After all, he had promised to get her only 2 pieces. Rüdiger Winterwald said he likes it when there are many options to choose from. But the box that is now in Judith Maibaum's hands must be chosen by her. That is not up for discussion. The young duke opened the box he had given the girl today and said that this jewel was called the lavender diamond. It was a very important and expensive gift. Rüdiger Winterwald added that this gemstone is the same color as Judith Maibaum's eyes, so it was very difficult to find in such a short period of time. But the young duke coped with this task with honor and is now very happy to present this gift to the main character. The main character looks closely at the lavender diamond and enjoys its beauty. The girl understands that the young duke made great efforts to find it and give it to her. Rüdiger Winterwald said that the main character could try on the rest of the jewelry later. But this diamond should adorn Judith Maibaum's neck immediately. The main character was a little embarrassed and confused when she heard the words of the young aristocrat. She thought that the young duke was a very sincere and sensitive man. After this, Rüdiger Winterwald prepared to take off his gloves and asked the main character if he could help her try on the lavender diamond now. This would bring him great pleasure, if Judith Maibaum did not mind. The main character listened attentively to her interlocutor and gladly gave him her thin and chiseled neck so that he could put on it the luxurious necklace that he had presented her with as a gift today. Rüdiger Winterwald carefully and tenderly began to put the lavender diamond on a chain around the heroine's neck. Meanwhile, Judith Maibaum is enjoying this process immensely and realizes that her heart is beating very fast. Most likely, this is due to the excessive emotions that have taken hold of her now. The girl felt the gentle touch of the young aristocrat's hands and her blood boiled from it. She waits for Rüdiger Winterwald to finally put the beautiful diamond on her neck. The main character noticed that the young aristocrat deliberately slows down with this and prolongs the pleasure. Apparently, he also really likes to touch the girl he really likes in such an unobvious way. Judith Maibaum decided to play a little joke on the young man who was inexperienced in courting girls. She said that she could put the chain on her own neck. These words surprised Rüdiger Winterwald very much and almost deprived him of self-control. The proud aristocrat immediately regained control of himself and said that he rejected the main character's offer and would cope with this task on his own. The young duke finally placed the chain with the lavender diamond on the neck of his beloved. He apologized for taking so long to do it and promised to do better next time. Judith Maibaum listened attentively to her interlocutor and said that she was not offended by him. After that, the girl thought that, it turns out, Rüdiger Maibaum knows how to apologize. She liked that very much. The main character asked her faithful maid Laura if she liked the lavender diamond that now adorns her mistress's neck. The maid is embarrassed and does not know what to say now. After a few seconds, the girl collected her thoughts and said that this precious ornament suited her mistress very well. It especially suited the color of her beautiful light purple eyes. Judith Maibaum appreciated this compliment from her maid. After that, the main character looked at herself in the mirror and she also really liked what she saw there. Rüdiger Winterwald gave the girl a wonderful gift, which came in very handy. Judith Maibaum is very pleased to have received the lavender diamond from the young aristocrat today. The girl is beginning to get a taste for it, and she is beginning to like receiving such gifts. She thanked the young duke for the present. Rudiger Winterwald smiled at his interlocutor and said that it was a mere trifle for him. After that, the young aristocrat suggested that the main character try on the beautiful bracelet that he had prepared for her. The young lord again volunteered to help the girl put on the precious jewelry. He explained that he needed to practice a little in order to cope faster in the future. The main heroine gave her consent. Judith Maibaum said she wanted to put the bracelet on her left wrist. She rolled up the sleeve of her dress, and Rudiger Winterwald noticed the scar she had from the hitman's attack on the train. The young lord remembers all these terrible and deadly events very well, because of which the girl almost lost her life. He promised himself again that he would do everything possible to protect Judith Maibaum from enemies and conspirators. The main character noticed that the young lord was thinking about something and hurried to dispel his thoughtfulness. She asked if everything was okay with him. Rudiger Winterwald pointed to the girl's hand and said that he was embarrassed by her scar. It brought back very negative memories for the young aristocrat, which broke his heart. The girl decided to ease the tension a little and said that it was nothing. She was used to getting scars during training because she always did various sports to stay in good physical shape. The young duke bowed his head and said that he was very guilty before Judith Maibaum because he was not able to protect her sufficiently at a mortally dangerous moment. After that, the young man deftly and quickly put a beautiful bracelet with precious stones on the left wrist of the main character. She was surprised at how well it worked out for Rudiger Winterwald this time. After all, he pretended to be a clumsy layman when he put on the necklace. Judith Maibaum looked her interlocutor in the eye and said that he should not blame himself for anything. He cannot foresee everything in this life, nor influence everything. But these words did not really encourage the young aristocrat, who believes that the incident with the hired killer has affected his honor. He should have foreseen everything and taken care of the safety of his family. After this, Rudiger Winterwald looked closely at the main character and emotionally addressed her with the words that in the future he would take a sufficient measure of responsibility to protect the girl from all possible misfortunes and troubles. All this sounds a little ambiguous, and the main character does not quite understand what the young duke is talking about now. But deep down, the girl understands that he is currently confessing his love to her. When Judith Maibaum realized this, she did not believe that it was even possible. Because everyone knows that Rudiger Winterwald is not interested in family relationships and prefers to serve in the army. The main character's personal maid overheard this conversation and screamed loudly, after which she covered her mouth with her hands in surprise. The maid Laura realized that the momentous day had come when the impregnable Rudiger Winterwald confessed his love to the girl. This was akin to a real miracle. The main character realized that she urgently needed to save herself from idle gossip, which now threatened her thanks to her personal maid. The girl turned to the young aristocrat and said that he would definitely take care of her and take responsibility, for example, for the treatment of her fresh scar. Judith Maibaum tries to change the subject quickly so that the maid doesn't guess anything. But the young aristocrat can't understand this yet. He is very puzzled by the behavior of his interlocutor. After this, the main character pointed out to Rudiger Winterwald that it was late and asked her to leave him alone because she was very tired. The young lord is very surprised and puzzled. He tries to understand what is really happening now, but nothing comes to his mind. Rudiger Winterwald did not expect such a development. He hoped for something different tonight, but the main character continues to insist on her own. She told the young aristocrat again that she was very tired today. Trying on jewelry takes a lot of energy. Rudiger Winterwald listened attentively to the girl and said that, in that case, he would leave and wished Judith Maibaum good night and a good sleep. The main character thought for a while and decided that the young lord must be thanked somehow for the wonderful gift that she really liked. The girl tries to find something to give the young man in love. A few seconds later, Judith Maibaum found a nice gift for the young duke and stopped the young man right at the door. Rudiger Winterwald looked at the main character in surprise and waited for her to tell him. Lady Judith picked up the scarf she had recently knitted for her nephew and handed it to Rudiger Winterwald. She said that she wanted to thank the young man for the wonderful gift and regretted that she could only do it in this way. The main character handed the scarf to the young lord and thought that she would be pleased if Luca and Rudiger Winterwald walked around their estates wearing the same scarves that she had knitted. The young lord accepted the gift from the girl's hands and remained silently. A silent pause ensued. The girl began to worry. Perhaps the young duke did not like her gift, but the young aristocrat hastened to dispel the main character's doubts. He looked closely at the woolen scarf that Judith Maibaum had given him and stroked it tenderly. After that, the young man said that he was very happy to receive such a precious gift for him. The main character is very happy that her gift was very much liked by the young Lord Winterwald. She said that she was very pleased. The young nobleman once again thanked the girl for the wonderful present and tightly pressed to his chest the woolen scarf that Judith Maibaum had knitted with her gentle and skillful hands. The main character wished Rüdiger Winterwald a pleasant evening and smiled at him sweetly. She was very pleased with today's date with the young lord and how everything turned out. The young nobleman wished Lady Judith sweet dreams and headed out of her room, clutching her precious gift tightly to his chest. At the moment, Rüdiger Winterwald is happy. The main character watched her interlocutor go. Next to her stands her personal maid Laura, who is very confused and puzzled by everything she has just observed in this room. A few minutes later, Lady Judith's maid pointed to numerous cases of jewelry and asked the main character what should be done with them. The girl had completely forgotten about the other jewels that Rüdiger Winterwald had given her today. She told her personal maid to hide them somewhere out of sight. The next morning came. The main character invited her nephew to her place to consult with him about the numerous jewels that she had received as a gift from Rüdiger Winterwald. The girl complained to Luca Winterwald that she had so many different pieces of jewelry that it was a headache for her, because she could no longer decide which one she should choose. But the clever boy doesn't see any problem with that. He thinks about the situation a little and suggests that his beloved aunt keep all the jewelry that the young lord gave her. Luca Winterwald looks at the main character carefully and advises her to leave the precious stones and gold for a rainy day. Anything can happen in life, and these jewels can then be sold and get a lot of money for them. The main character can't believe her ears. She is surprised by the coldness and calmness with which this little boy solves problems of such a scale. Lady Judith realized that she can't do that. The girl looked sternly at her 11-year-old nephew and said that aristocrats are free to do as they please. But you can't get rid of gifts so easily. The main character thought for a moment and added that Luca Winterwald would definitely not be pleased if she also got rid of his gifts and took them, for example, to some pawn shop. The girl decided to have a short educational talk with her nephew and said that he should treat gifts from people around him with respect, especially if they are close people. Also, he should not endlessly take advantage of the affection and loyalty of relatives and loved ones. Otherwise, this source may dry up. Luca Winterwald listens attentively to his beloved aunt. He tries to understand and remember everything she is teaching him now, because he trusts her. In addition, the main character added that a self-respecting person will never mindlessly accept gifts, because he may be known as a person who is worth nothing and is easily sold. Judith Maibaum's nephew looked at her intently and asked how serious she was now. Maybe his favorite aunt was just joking around a little. Lady Judith answered the boy that she was speaking very seriously to him now. These were very important words that he should remember for the rest of his life. People should always know the limits of what is permitted and observe moderation in everything. Otherwise, it could end sadly for them. The main character thought of Franz Birkenisch and said that endless greed will surely destroy its bearer. It is a parasite that destroys a person from the inside. Lady Judith also thought that she should not get used to a luxurious life because she would have to return to her hometown of Emden one day. Luca Winterwald listens attentively to his aunt. He agrees with some words but does not yet share some of the main character's arguments. This will require some time and life experience. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. It was the teacher who had come for Lady Judith's nephew. The boy's next lesson was about to begin. The main character said that Luca Winterwald would soon leave the room to continue his studies. The boy would like to chat a little longer with his beloved aunt, but his teacher is already waiting for him. Lady Judith's nephew headed towards the door and told the girl that she was now part of the Winterwald family, so she should raise her standards and learn to think like a true aristocrat. Judith Maibaum was very surprised when she heard these words from her nephew. The girl realized that they were not as far from the truth as they might seem at first glance. As Luca Winterwald approached the door that led to the corridor, he turned around and told his aunt that she would never return to her old life. Therefore, she needed to start getting used to the new reality. The girl looks in surprise at the 11-year-old boy, who, as it turns out in practice, understands the current situation more than she does. Sometimes it happens like that. Finally, the clever child looked meaningfully at his beloved aunt and asked her to think carefully about his words at her leisure. This would help Judith Maibaum finally make a final choice and stop rushing in different directions. Before closing the door to the room, Luca Winterwald called the main character Mom, and only then went to class in the company of his teacher. The girl was simply taken aback by what had just happened here. She doesn't even know what to think now. The main character is left alone in her room in a state of shock. She sits on the couch and tries to comprehend what just happened to her. And the reason for this is a conversation with her nephew. Judith Maybaum is thinking hard about her future. The girl is trying to analyze the current situation and make a final choice. Maybe she really will have to stay in this castle forever. Suddenly, the cheerful maid Laura entered the room and slightly frightened the main character with her abrupt appearance. The girl apologized for this and said that she brought her aromatic tea to dispel her sad thoughts. Judith Maybaum thanked her maid for her concern and said that nothing terrible had happened to her. The girl simply had accumulated a lot of different thoughts that needed to be sorted out. The maid Laura pours freshly brewed tea and says that she just met Luca Winterwald in the hallway. The girl noticed that the boy looks very much like his father. After that, the maid thought for a moment and added that the child's character was more similar to Rüdiger Winterwald. The main character agreed with the maid. Laura said that Luca and Rüdiger Winterwald are both cold, secretive, and taciturn. Both aristocrats are also distinguished by their sharp minds and intelligence, as well as their ability to study science. The maid added that they had another thing in common that united them. Both aristocrats loved and trusted Judith Maybaum. These words somewhat embarrassed the main character, but she did not show it. Judith Maybaum thought for a moment and said that perhaps both gentlemen were simply naturally very timid and shy. But the maid Laura did not agree with the main character. The maid said that she saw Luca Winterwald playing in his free time. This boy sometimes reminds her of a real hurricane or something like that. He can be very cheerful and energetic. After that, the maid Laura became a little embarrassed and said that she wanted to ask the lady something personal. Could it be that Lady Judith and Lord Rüdiger were a couple? The main character was not very surprised when she heard this question. She had been expecting it from her curious maid for a long time. The girl thought that Laura was very predictable. Lady Judith laughed loudly and told her personal maid that nothing of the sort was happening. She considered herself, first and foremost, the widow of Jonas Winterwald, but the maid was surprised when she heard her mistress's answer and said that she had seen with her own eyes what had happened in Lady Judith's room the previous evening and how Lord Rüdiger was looking at her. The girl added that for the first time in her life she had seen the young duke so gentle and courteous with a woman. The young lord had never behaved like that with anyone before. The main character listened carefully to her maid and said that she had confused tenderness and courtesy with the ordinary sense of duty that is inherent in all aristocrats. Judith Maybaum added that her personal maid should think about other things and not collect gossip from all the nooks and crannies of Winterwald Castle. If she was told that the young duke had only shown his sense of duty, then that was true, and there was no need to ask unnecessary questions. After that, the main character smiled sweetly at her maid and asked her to tell the other castle workers how things really are. The maid Laura was a little confused, but promised to do everything exactly as she ordered. Apparently, the maid believed Lady Judith's words, and now she will not spread idle gossip. The sweet governess is as naive and good-natured as she is always cheerful. These are the very character traits that Judith Maybaum likes about her.